Hey there, Celeste. How are you? Hope you're doing well. Oh, that's great. I'm really happy to hear that. I'm glad life is good. Hey there, Flower Goddess. Welcome to the stream. Good to have you here. Alrighty, folks, we're going to get started here in about 1 minute. Hey, Copper Lily. Hey, Holly Luck. Alrighty, folks. Happy Sunday, everyone. I hope you all are having a great weekend. Hey, Arwen. Hey, Bear, I miss you. Still way early in my classes, but always excited to learn more. That's fantastic. We're so happy you're here. It's great to see you. Loving the positivity here on a beautiful Sunday. It's very hot outside where I am right now, so I'm very happy for air conditioning. I might get a little warm in this room where I am. My computer, when I'm streaming, tends to get hot, and so I may have to open the door behind me at some point to let in some cool air from elsewhere in the house. But we'll see how we do. Yeah, it's quite hot outside, which then makes it hot inside, along with my computer. All right, so first things first, if you are new to the stream today, I do have closed captioning available. So if you would like to, you can hover your mouse over the right side of the window. You should see a pop up with the closed caption icon. You can click that to get live auto transcribed captions of what I'm saying. Um, also, how is my audio levels? I know we had some issues with the low mic volume last week, so I just wanted to check in and see how is my mic volume this week. Does it sound okay, louder, anything like that? I do have it bumped up a couple points. All right, I'm seeing some good, good, good. Okay. Louder than usual, which is good. Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I did bump it up a little bit. Hey, Nino, thank you so much for the follow. I appreciate that. Good to have you here. All right. So, quick announcement. Twitch has announced that they are discontinuing the streaming software that I use. So I currently use Twitch Studio to essentially, host my overlays and my streams, and basically uh, all of my stream stuff is hosted in Twitch Studio. And Twitch has announced that they will be discontinuing Twitch Studio on May 30th. So they didn't give me very much notice. And so I'm going to have to basically completely move my streams to something like OBS or Streamlabs. I did use OBS for a while. Wasn't super happy with it, but I'm sure that was a me problem and not a technology problem. So do bear with me. I'm going to be forced to make that transition at the end of May. I'll probably move to Streamlabs. Um, but just beware. I may, need to change my schedule or move things around, depending on how long it takes me to get everything set back up, get everything, reconfigured the way it needs to be. And also, I'm happy to hear any suggestions that any of you might have, as far as your favorite, if you are a streamer, as far as your favorite, software platforms, plugins, anything like that. Do feel free to share that if you have any suggestions. So yeah, just quick announcement there. Unfortunately, Twitch Studio is going away. That's what I've been using since I started streaming 2 years ago. So, got to switch, I guess. I wish it wasn't, but them's the breaks. Alrighty, so today we are going to be taking the app that we built last week, which was an app to help you pick the appropriate houseplant for your lifestyle. Um, hey, Starker, welcome to the stream. Good to have you here. So we're going to be taking this app that we built last week, and we are going to be converting it from EJS and JavaScript into React. And React is a wonderful tool for building sort of apps that require a lot of user interaction, apps that just in general have a lot of client side interactivity. So by client side, we mean what the user sees. So apps with a lot of things that are changing and happening in front of the user, have a lot of elements that the user can interact with. React is a great tool for that, for those types of apps. Um, Oh, fantastic. Starker says, I'm just learning React. This is perfect. I was just now watching a tutorial. That's fantastic. Yeah. React is a fantastic, yeah, it's a great way to build apps, especially apps with a lot of interactivity. Um, Thank you so much for the follow, by the way. And now, why would I say that React is a great tool for apps with a lot of interactivity? Why do I call that out specifically? If you're new to the stream, I ask a lot of questions for chat. That's how that helps you learn. So why is React really great for apps with a lot of interactivity? What's different about React than if I were to build my app in something like EJS or plain old JavaScript? Yes, React has state. That's right. So state in React, it means that React can keep track of the state or the condition of various elements on the page and make changes when a particular element is updated. That's correct. Manage states in sync, yes. But in a more general sense, what does React do that, for example, a plain static HTML page can't do? What can React do that a plain HTML page can't do? Hey, Renee, it's good to see you. Yeah, there you go, 21. So React has the ability to reload individual components or individual elements on the page rather than the entire page. So React is smart enough by managing its own state that it can track when a very specific element on the page is changed and only refresh that one element rather than having to reload the entire page. So for a very small lightweight app like the one we built last week, it's probably not a big deal, but if you have an app with a lot of media, an app with a lot of complex elements that are going to maybe take a while to load each time, or a noticeable amount of resources to load each time, then you're better off making it so that only specific elements on the page refresh when they need to, rather than the whole page refreshing every time. Oh, Salah, thank you so much for the follow. I appreciate that. Good to have you here. Yeah, so we're going to practice converting an app from EJS to React, and we're going to see how that goes. Yes, re-render. Yeah, so it chooses which components it wants to re-render based on their state, and when that state changes, then it will re-render the component. Hey, Matthias, good to see you. Yep. So the app that we built last week is fairly simple. 20 says, love this project idea. I need to repot my pothos soon. Yeah, I built this app because it was something that I actually could use. It was something where I, either seems like for me, either houseplants die immediately or they live for 10 years or longer and there's no in between, right? I just, either they work for me or they don't. So if I could pick a plant that I knew was going to live based on my lifestyle, then that would be a better option than just luck of the draw. Hey, Sala, they say, is SAS good to learn in 2024? Depends on what you're getting into. Um, so I've done a little bit of SAS in my data analytics career, but now I've primarily focused on SQL, so I'm by no means a SAS expert. Um, I think if you're going to be getting into data science, then maybe it's good. It just depends on what you're going for, Sala. Data science, probably yes, but data analytics or just general development, probably no. Hey, Gek, good to see you. You're converting your version of the cat book to React. That's awesome. All right, so this is the app we built last time. This is the React version that I'm running right now. So it looks a little bit different, but it essentially functions the same. Um, you basically just make a selection on what type of plant you would like to see, and then you click submit, and it gives you a selection of 3 choices along with photos of that plant. And for this particular project, we are using the Perennial API. Perennial? I don't know how to say it exactly. Um, I'm going to pull the link up here. I want to pull it on this screen because it's going to put my API code probably right at the top, unless I'm careful. Pull this over here. Yeah, so we are using this Perennial API. And so if you'd like to follow along today, but you don't already have your own API code, you can head to perennial.com, which is the first link there in chat that I posted. Head over to API, and you do have to create an account, but you can create a free account and get your API key right away. So create your account. You can head to the docs and get your API key from there, and that's all there is to it. It's really just single click sign up, get your API key right away, and the only thing you need to connect to this API is the key. Excuse me. One limitation of this API is it only allows 100 free requests per day. So we may hit the rate limiter on this particular account that I'm using signed into right now, but that's okay because I have 2 accounts. So in the middle of the stream last week, I had to swap accounts so that I could keep making requests to the API. But luckily, it's not too finicky about that. Hey, Subtle. Starker says, this is nice. Thank you for sharing. May I ask what time you usually stream? Oh, yeah. I normally stream on Sunday. So today at 3 p.m. Eastern. So today's stream is an hour later than my normal streams. That was because I was attending another event prior to that, and I wanted to take a little time to recharge in between events. But normally my streams start at 3 p.m. Eastern on Sundays. Don't be overexcited and share your API key here. Yeah, I'll try to avoid it. If I do, I'll just switch accounts. Or actually, they make it very easy to generate a new key. So if I need to, I can just generate a new key. Oh, come on. Windows, don't be silly. There we go. All right, so if you would like to see the starter code, the code that we are starting with, you can do !project in chat right now. !project. Actually, sorry, !project will give you the link to the finished code. My apologies. That is the finished code, so the React version. If you would like to see the starter code, which I also should have linked to, but I didn't, I will get you a link to that repository as well. Really, you can just take this repo address and take off the React portion, and just the repo that's just titled greener_thumb, that is the starter EJS code. So this is the repo for, yes, thank you for sharing that, Tame. Appreciate that. I'll spam it a few times. So that's the starter code there. And then the finished code is available at !project. So don't want to leave you in the lurch. If you have to take a break, if you get stuck, if you fall behind, you can always look at the finished code and figure out where we're going. Capitally says, is this where we left off last week? Yes, it is. Yep. So if you coded along last week, then you will be in the same spot as what's in the starter repo. And if you didn't, that's okay. You can just start straight from the repo and jump right in with us. All right, so we are going to be, again, we're going to be working with React today. Let me get my notes pulled back up here. And when we are working with React, there's a few different ways that we can do that to set up our project as quickly and easily as possible. What are a few ways that we can quickly and easily start a React project from the command line? What are some ways that we can quickly and easily start a React project? Starker says, was that the Windows XP wallpaper? Yes, it is. Yeah, a couple of different ways we could do it are create React app or Vite. So today we are going to be using Vite, as you might have seen from my little tab that I have open up here. Yeah, we're going to be using Vite to start our project. There's really nothing wrong with using something like Create React App as well. I will say I think Vite is a little bit cleaner in the setup. It requires you to do, less cleanup of files and a little bit. Um, there's some fewer steps in the setup process. So I do prefer Vite. However, you can use whatever lets you get the job done. Yeah, exactly. And CRA is technically not really being updated or maintained. You can still use it, but I would definitely use Vite in my opinion. We've done both here on this channel several times, but so what I'm going to do is go ahead and make this window bigger for now, while we do our little setup. And I'm going to open a terminal. I'm using Bash, but you can use whatever one you normally use. And I'm just going to say npm create Vite at latest. That'll make sure you get the latest version. And then whatever you want to name your app. So I'm going to name mine Greener Thumb Demo, just because this is my demo version. And so when I do that, it's going to ask me a series of questions. And for package name, it can just be, whatever makes sense to you. And then it'll ask us to select a framework. So we're going to choose React. And we're just going to choose plain JavaScript. You don't need to get fancy. You could do this in TypeScript. If you're familiar with TypeScript, you could use it. We're going to use plain JavaScript. Yeah, and then it gives you a couple of instructions on what to do. Probably the most important instruction after you initialize Vite and initialize your project with Vite is to notice that Vite actually creates the project in a subfolder. So all the files are in here. So you need to follow the instructions that it tells you to do, which is first you need to cd into your folder, like so, and then we run npm install. And that's going to install all the packages we need in order to make this React project run. Starker said, for node modules, I was using NPM, but I recently tried Bun, and I'm surprised how fast it loads everything. Yeah, there's alternatives to NPM out there, certainly. Bun is a little bit newer, and it might take over the market. I don't know. We'll see. For now, I'm familiar with NPM, so I'm going to keep using it for now, but there's nothing wrong with, trying other package managers like Bun. That's the main alternative that I've heard. Okay, and so we've gone ahead and done our npm install, and we are going to, next we're going to go ahead and I think we need to install one more thing. Let me just check. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and install .env as well. Oh, yes, good point, Hollyluck. Bun is alternative to Node. Yes, that's exactly right. Thank you for the correction. Yep, appreciate that. Woo! My goodness. Thank you so much for the gifted sub.
One subscription to Biddies for Titties.
Wow, thank you so much for the gifted sub. I appreciate that. I hope you're having a great day. Weird username, but it's the thought that counts. I appreciate it. Okay. Thank you. All right, so we've installed .env, and now let's go ahead and kind of set up our folder structure here a little bit. We'll go ahead and look at what folders they've given us. So given what I see here, obviously we've got our node modules. Inside of our source, we've kind of got our actual JSX files that we're going to be using to write our React. In public, this is where we're going to put our assets, like our images. Um, we've got our index.html package stuff. What else do we need? What is something very sort of glaring that is missing here that we're going to need to add, or that we should add? What is a potential glaring omission? No, even before we get it, we don't really need to think about routing because this is going to be a single page app. So just in general, let's think about, that's okay. That's perfectly fine to say you don't know. Let's think about what we're doing with this application. What we're doing is we are reaching out and we're talking to an external API, right? And that external, we already kind of talked about the setup we need to do in order to talk to that API. We needed to get a what? In order to talk to that API, I told you to go to perennial.com and sign up and get what? Why did we have to sign up to the API to get what? API key, right? And where does that API key go in our app, in our project? Not in models. If we have something that's secret and private, where should it go? Something secret and private inside of our application that we don't want just anybody to be able to steal from us. Where does it go? Yeah, like Holly and Robico said, it should go in a environment variable file, in a .env file. Exactly. And then we can take that file and we can put that in our gitignore. So it's important to remember the distinction between gitignore and a .env file. The .env file is where those secrets actually go, where those API keys, where those passwords, that's where we should put all that stuff. It should never go directly into our code. Anything secret should never be stored in plain text in your code. It should go in a .env file, which you can then exclude in a gitignore. Yeah. Mustafa, welcome to the stream. Kwame, welcome to the stream. They say, Mayan, what resources do you recommend getting started with React? The new React docs, so like the official React documentation, is actually very good. We went through the entire React docs live on stream. It was like a 7-part series that we did, like seven straight streams that we did, just going through the documentation and doing all the examples. And that's how I learned React. Um, Literally that, just walking straight through the documentation and literally doing all the examples live. I had taught me how to use React. So I think the official documentation is really great. The docs, exactly, as 21 said. All right, so let's go ahead and add a .env file to our root folder here. Now be careful, make sure that you're putting this file inside of the folder that Veet created for you. Don't put it at the root, put it inside this folder that Veet created. So we'll add that here. And inside of this folder is where we're going to put our API key. So I'm going to put it in here. I'm not going to show you what that key is, but you can basically declare that variable to be whatever makes sense to you as long as you reference it correctly in your code. So it could just be API key, it could be perennial API key, whatever, whatever you want to make that. Just remember what it is. I'm going to move this over here and I'm going to put my actual key in there. I'm going to save it and I'm going to close it. Hey, Big Ambo. All right, so I've got my variable stored in my .env file now. And the next thing I'm going to do is immediately add it to my gitignore. So you can see that Veet has put several things in there by default, but one thing it did not put in there by default is .env. Oh, goodness, what happened?
Celeste the Best
Oh,
88 gifted a tier 1 subscription to Big Embo.
Thank you so much for the gifted sub. Wow, that's so kind of you. Thank you, Celeste. Enjoy your gifted sub, Big Embo. Wow, thank you so much, Celeste. That's so generous of you. Um, and also, too, I realized that the last time that gifted sub was given out, for both of you, thank you so much for subscribing. I need to remember to do the special subscriber screen. Thank you both. I really appreciate it. I hope y'all are having a great day. You're very cool. Thank you. Santa Celeste, indeed. So generous. Very kind. All right. So I've got my API key in there. So we want to make sure that we add .env to our getignore. So all you need to do is just add it like that and then save. Now when we push this to GitHub, you are not going to accidentally be putting your API key out there on the internet for anybody to steal, which is not a mistake we ever want to make. George V says, to be proficient in React, what is the ideal reaction time to have? Not sure if you're making a joke there or not, but React is not too hard to pick up as long as you have the appropriate base JavaScript skills. It helps if you're familiar with vanilla JavaScript already, because basically React is just JavaScript wearing a funny hat. So, you know, it's just JavaScript with a hat on, just with a few extra features, a few extra abilities that vanilla JavaScript doesn't have. So anybody can get familiar with it fairly quickly. My goodness, Celeste.
Celeste the Best 88 gifted a tier 1
Thank you
subscription
so
to
much.
ESV.
Holy cannoli. Thank you so much, Celeste. Welcome to the stream, George. You've already got a subscription. Congratulations. Y'all are popping off. Hey, it's all good, Celeste. Again, I really appreciate it. That's so very kind of you. I'm so glad that you brought some friends here to enjoy the stream as well. Wow. You all are very cool. All right. Okay, so we've got our API key stored in our .env file. We've got our getignore ignoring our .env file, and now we can do just a little bit of cleanup. I'm going to go ahead and actually, I don't need to do. Actually, no. With Vite, we really don't need to do that much cleanup. We're just going to kind of leave things the way they are, and then we can make adjustments as we go if we need to. So I'm going to in my I'm just realizing I put my images in the wrong folder, but that's okay. We'll be fine. This is fine. We're going to put our images inside of the assets folder. So inside of the source folder, go into assets, and I'm going to create another folder in there called images. And inside of the images folder, I'm going to move my 2 images from the repository for placeholders for individual plants, and then the splash image for the home page. So I'm going to just drop those in there. You can grab them yourself from the repository. So inside of the source folder, inside of the assets folder, we created an images folder and put our 2 images for the splash screen and for any placeholders where the API can't find an image. So you can just drop those in straight from the repo, or you can add your own. That's fine too. There's no harm in that, as long as you name them appropriately and you reference them appropriately in the code. All right, so as we talked about earlier, Stalker says, do you have to delete the extra and unwanted files every time we create a React app using Vite? Yeah, but it's really, I mean, it's not too hard to do. Vite has less of that extra fluff than like Create React App does. React has a lot less of that. Vite has a lot less of that fluff than Create React App does. So there's really only a couple things to delete. Yeah. Holly, I am realizing that I, probably should have put them in public. They did actually work just fine, though. I didn't have any issues with the images rendering being in here. So I'm going to leave it for now. That could be a cleanup type thing that you do. I'm always hesitant to make changes to code that I've already worked, that's already working live on stream. We can do it at the end, though. We could shift them over after we get everything else built. But yeah, that I did realize when I opened this up, I was like, "Ah, I should have put them in public. You know what I mean? Yeah, better for caching. That's good to know. Yeah, but yeah, that could definitely be a cleanup thing for at the end. All right, so we're going to keep pretty much all these files in this list here the same. We can get rid of this react.svg and this one here. Those can go away. But these four things are going to stay the same. And let's take a peek in each one so we understand what they are. So first off is our CSS. And then this is our first actual React file. So JSX is the suffix that React uses for its code. That's essentially the language that we're writing in. It looks like a mixture of HTML and JavaScript, but it's actually JSX. And then it, will render out as HTML in the browser. So essentially our app.jsx is like our main component, and then that will render here into HTML. So we still need an HTML file because that's going to bundle up all of our sort of React stuff. And oh my goodness, thank you so much for the Prime sub.
Athene does it just subscribed with Prime.
Wow, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Y'all are popping off today. Gosh dang. You're very cool. Thank you so much for subscribing. George says, my favorite coder besides mine is 21 SVG. I'll have to check them out. Hey, welcome. Athens. Great, that's so awesome. I'm glad you were able to catch me live. I love it when folks get to finally see me live after watching, YouTube videos and stuff. Because I do think there is a certain fun, additional level of fun to the live component of streaming versus just watching a recording. And you can ask questions too, so that's even better. Oh, 21 Savage, I get you, Georgie. Thank you. Yeah, took me a minute, but yeah, all right, there we go. I get you. All right, so our index.html is essentially acting kind of like a wrapper. So what we can see here is that there's really no content on this page, right? It's just an HTML shell with a div ID of root. And that's kind of how React works, is it essentially executes a bunch of code to figure out what it should render, and then it just kind of plugs that in to an HTML shell and it renders as HTML in the browser. So React kind of masquerades itself as HTML when it really isn't. It's JavaScript wearing a fancy hat, and it renders out as HTML. The best desktop wallpaper ever. Yeah, definitely. Love me some Windows XP, baby. All right. And so the actual legwork happens under the hood in our app.jsx. And so what that does is actually renders out the the master component, and then any child components underneath it, and then turns that into HTML in the browser. And so what it's doing here in our main.jsx is actually attaching all of that React code to that root div. So remember, the div that we had here in our index.html had an ID of root. And so what's happening in our main.jsx is it's saying, all right, take this master app component and get the root element and render the whole page as HTML. So it's kind of this is the joining of those two elements together, the plain HTML and the rendered out React into a final product on the page. Yeah, and you can also build desktop and mobile apps with JavaScript. Absolutely. Yep. And Big Hembo says we can use JavaScript now as our front end, back end, and Markdown. Yep, it can do anything. Yeah, so there's ways you can build, desktop apps with JavaScript. I actually looked into that a little bit ago. What is it called? What is that platform called that lets you build desktop apps? Electron, that's it. Yeah, I looked into that a while back, actually. I was looking to see if we could use it for some stuff we were building at work. Yeah. Subtle says, how hard is it to design a website like Stripe and is built on React. The thing, be very cautious. If you are currently a freelancer and you are building sites for clients, be very, very, very cautious about designing anything yourself that has to do with payments, credit card information, or sensitive personal information. This is just a general caution. Um, if you're doing client work, when it at all possible, don't try to build Stripe yourself. Just pay for the integration into your application, because Stripe has all the appropriate protections, insurance, because you don't want to be the one that's responsible for losing someone's credit card data or their personal information. That never wants to be you. If anything, the liability should fall to a third party. So just be very careful about that. I never recommend anybody build any payment processing or personal information processing software on their own. Yeah, don't roll your own. Absolutely. Hey, Souza, welcome to the stream. Good to have you here. We did. We had an excellent teacher. Absolutely. Thank you so much. All right, so that's kind of the basics of how the shell of this app is going to work. Essentially, it's going to we can have a number of components. Those components are going to roll up into essentially like a master component, and then that component is going to render out as HTML in the browser. So we're going to build a couple of different components today. Uh, let's look back at our app and try to figure out what those components should contain. So I'm going to go back. When you're trying to plan out what should my app look like in React, it's important to think about what are the individual interactive elements on the screen, and how can we break those down into components. Okay. So looking at the app, just without knowing anything about how it works, what would you say is a part of the screen that's interactive? Or alternatively, a part of the screen that's going to be subject to change, something about the interface that could change. The form. Yeah, absolutely. The form and the button. Certainly. Yeah, the form. What's another part of the screen that could change? Yeah, the display, the display for the plants, right? Exactly, what appears on the right. And those two things could be independent, right? They could change independently. I could be interacting with the left side of the screen while the right side of the screen just stays static, right? Or once I hit submit, I expect the left side of the screen to stay the same, but the right side of the screen would update. It would hit the API and it would give me a new result. So the left side of the screen could change independently from the right side of the screen. So what I'm seeing here is probably two components. One for the form, and then one for the result, whatever we get back. So two separate components, each tracking their own states separately, um, and being able to update and refresh separately as needed. So I think two components for this. A lot of applications are going to have more than that. But again, this is a simple single page application, so we're going to go with that. But if we had, let's say, a menu bar or something up here, maybe a login, an image carousel, uh, multiple forms, each of those would probably be their own component. Just all the individual interactive elements of your user interface are what you want to consider when you're breaking down that page. Yeah. Matthias says, in the European Union, we have to follow GDPR. I have a clause in freelance contracts that essentially says find a lawyer for this. Yeah. So the US, as with most things, has far fewer consumer protections than many other countries do. If, but still, I think it's, even if you are in the US and you're a freelancer, don't build your own payment processing software. If you're outside of the US, then you might even have probably far more restrictions on that than someone in the US would, certainly. Oh, I see. You're talking more about design. Yeah, there's a lot of really beautiful sites built on React. React is extremely popular. There are newer platforms out there, Next and all that stuff. But uh, again, it's just the newest. Just because something is newer doesn't mean it's, you know, has more utility than something that's used widely across the entire internet. So I still do recommend that people learn React, and then you can always graduate to another platform if you want to. But React is still incredibly popular and, yeah, widely used. Matthias says the concern. Georgie says the concerns are going to be extra separated now. Hell yeah, yeah, exactly. We're basically saying, all right, this doesn't need to be dependent on this at all. Um, they can update themselves separately. We don't need to reload the whole page every single time. All we need to do is make sure that this updates together and this updates together, and we should be good to go. Excuse me. And we could have even more components. Yes, for each one of these cards, that's absolutely possible. We could turn them into individual card components and reference those components whenever we need to. I will say that I did not do that for this particular project, just given that this was an EJS conversion to React, and I kind of wanted to make it look somewhat similar to the original EJS version, like visually, but that would be a great improvement to this project, is for you to then take that and break these cards into their own components and then reference those components as we go. Bigambo says, in React, do we only use components for elements that change during the user's session? Um, Not necessarily. You can use components for just things that you want to do more than once, something that you want to be reusable. Like, for example, yeah, like these cards. These cards would be great candidates to be a component because it's the same format, styling, elements, just repeated multiple times. And so rather than doing the same thing 3 times, you can just have 3 components, reference the same component 3 times. And that makes it easier for you to, for example, let's say that you had an app with 6 pages, and at the top of each page you wanted to have a menu bar with options. So rather than you having to copy and paste the same code 6 times onto all 6 pages, you can make a component and just have that component referenced on each of those pages. So write the code for that menu bar 1 time and then reference it 6 times elsewhere in your application. So that's part of the utility as well. If you're familiar with something like EJS, then it's sort of similar to partials, where you can reference a partial multiple times. But yeah, you just have a single component 1 time, reference it 6 times, or however many times you need to. Another nice thing about that too is then if you want to go and change that menu bar and make sure it's changed on all your pages, change the color, whatever, change the way it behaves, hamburger menu, whatever. If you want to make updates to it, you can then only change it in 1 place rather than 6 places. Yeah, and you can break it down pretty much as far as you want. You could have this button be an individual component if you wanted to. Now we're not going to get that granular today. That's not really the goal, but I have other React projects on my channel where we have, gotten a bit more granular in our component levels. Yep. Yeah, and you can have parent-child components, so the form itself could be a component, and then you could have a button component inside the form. It's really just depends on what you need. Now, I will say the official React docs actually have some great guidelines on how you can divide up a user interface into only the components you actually need, and ways that can help you make those types of decisions to figure out, all right, this should be a component, this doesn't need to be a component. How far should I divide this up, right? Because not everything needs to be a component. It just depends on what you're trying to accomplish. So check out the official React docs. It gives you some wonderful guidelines on how to do that, when and how to make those types of decisions. All right. So we made our decision. We're going to need at least 2 components, one for the left form and then one for the right side where we get our results back. So, and I've got the original code here somewhere. Nice. All right, we got our images in here. Got that, got that. All right, so now let's pop in and we're going to create 2 component files inside of our source folder here. So I'm inside the source folder, and inside the source folder, I'm going to create a file called form section dot JSX, and then another file called plant list JSX. And notice the capitalization here. Components, in order that they can be identified differently than regular HTML tags, components do have specific rules for capitalization, and so we're going to capitalize our files to kind of match that. Each of these files is going to refer to a single component, and we will build that component in the file, and then we'll export it so it can be used elsewhere in our application. Yeah, you could create a component folder if you wanted. We're not going to in this case, but yeah, absolutely. You'll often see a component folder. Making sure I catch up with chat. Yeah, and once we start building this out a little bit, I'll talk more about why we need to use certain capitalization rules for components, why that actually does matter when you're using React, and you can think about that a little bit. So, for example, I'll let you. I won't share it right away, and please, if you know the answer, please don't share it in chat. But um, you can see that in React, as I mentioned before, we use a mixture of what looks like HTML tags and JavaScript. And when we reference a specific component, we can see that, for example, our app component here is capitalized and it turns green. And then we can, reference that component and call upon it whenever we need it. So you can think about why this might be capitalized. And we'll come back to that once we start building these out. No spoilers. Yeah. Yep. All right, so let's see, where can we start? Let's go ahead and start with our form. We're going to start with our form element, so the left side of the page, our form component. And the first thing we're going to go ahead and do is import React into our component. So import React. And we're also going to import use state. We talked about state a little bit earlier. State is probably the most powerful part of React. And state refers to, hey, watch it. Welcome to the stream. Good to have you here. State refers to the literal state of each part of our user interface. So by state, we mean what condition is it in. And React is literally reacting anytime that condition changes. And so state is super powerful. It helps us track interactions from the user. It helps us track really any type of changes that we want within our user interface, as many or as few changes as we want, and then update our user interface based on those changes. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a state variable. So I'm going to say const. I'm going to set up a sort of a enclosing, basically my enclosing component. So my component name is going to be form section. You can see I'm capitalizing it. And bear with me for a second. I'll explain what this is doing in a minute. We're going to be passing a couple things into this component. If you're familiar with React, you probably recognize what this might be that we're passing in. But inside of this component, the first thing I'm going to do is declare a couple of props. Yeah. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to declare a state variable. So what this variable is going to do is it's literally just going to be tracking what state our form is in. So anytime anybody makes changes to the form, they make a new selection in the dropdown, they change a selection that they previously made, it's going to be holding that information and tracking it every single time it changes. So this variable is going to follow a very specific format for the setup. The variable name is going to be form data, and then the function that we use to update that state is going to be called set form data. And anytime you declare a state variable, you'll see that we use the exact same syntax for setting it up. And we'll talk about this as well. So this form data variable is going to be an object that holds all the properties from our form. So edible, so essentially each of the form fields is going to be stored in this variable. It's just an object and it just holds edible, pets, kids. It's just key value pairs, properties in an object. Gosh dang, if I could type. Pets, kids, lifespan, water schedule, and sunlight. Not sunlight, sunlight. There we go. And so this state variable is going to be tracking these 5 values. And whenever those values change in our form, we're going to call this set form data function to specifically update the appropriate value or values. So form data is the variable that holds this information, and set form data is the function that causes this variable to update. Okay? Yeah. Yeah, and Holly says in the most recent versions of React, you can import React. Oh, that's nice. It will be imported automatically. Very cool. Hey, frogs, welcome. They said, I just finished up the prequel to the stream. Fantastic. Excited to convert to React. Oh, I'm so glad it's been helpful. Thank you so much, frogs. Yeah, so now that we have this state variable, we can track anytime that that form changes and capture this data here. We won't be covering custom hooks today, but I believe, I can't remember, I think we covered hooks in my full React series from a while back. So my Learn React series, it's on YouTube, where we went over the documentation. Yeah. All right, so now how do we update, how do we know when to call this set form data function? Well, we know that we want to update this state variable anytime the user has an interaction with the form and makes a change, right? Anytime they interact with the form and change one of those drop downs. So if we are interacting with a form or interacting with any kind of object on a web page, how do we recognize that in JavaScript? What can we do in JavaScript to recognize when someone is interacting with an element on the page? What is captured in general? Ah, that's a great guess. They say an event listener. Yeah. So we are listening for, yeah, and you all are saying it. In general, we're listening for what thing? We're listening for an event, right? That interaction. So when we say event listener, when we say click event, whatever, that's a specific type of thing called an event. And an event isn't just a descriptor word. An event is literally data that is being captured that we can pass into our application. So if you've ever tried to do a console log on an event, you'll see it's actually a ton of data that's being captured. So we can determine when to call this function by essentially waiting for that event, figuring out which thing they chose from that dropdown by looking at the event target, and then setting that in our state variable. So we're going to have a function specifically to handle that called handle change. And handle change is going to take an event. So whenever they interact with the form, it's going to take in that event. You'll often see that event is abbreviated as E. So if you see E in a function, just this, that 99 times out of 10 is referring to that specific event object. And you could also call it event if you wanted, but it's all very commonly abbreviated as E. And so what I want to do is I want to say, all right, in this event, what were the details of that interaction? Obviously, the user did something because we've captured an event, but what did they actually click on? What did they interact with? What did they interact with? Well, luckily, that data is captured in the event. What they interacted with, the specific item on the drop down menu, is captured as the target. So, again, an event is just a big old object, and we can look into that object and grab the target that they actually clicked on. So, I'm going to set up, I'm going to deconstruct this. I'm going to say, what was the name of the thing they interacted with, and what was the actual value they chose. I can get that data from the event object and the target. Right? Oops. There we go. Now I can call my set form data function and pass in that information. I'm going to deconstruct, or I'm going to spread out using the spread operator. I'm going to spread what's already there, and I'm going to update the appropriate value. All right, so let's talk back a little bit what I just did here. Oh gosh, it just started thundering really loudly outside. So I'm looking inside of the event, whatever the user interacted with. I'm grabbing the information about the thing they interacted with. I'm storing that information in a name variable for the name of the thing they interacted with and the value of the thing they interacted with. And then I'm calling my set form data function to update my state. I'm using the spread operator to break apart the existing data. And then I'm only updating the value or values that were changed. So whatever that name is, it's going to say, all right, which one of these did they interact with? Oh, they interacted with the edible name, the edible box in the dropdown. All right, what was the value? Did they choose yes or no? And that's going to update that here. Yeah, Utka, welcome to the stream. We are working with React today. That's right. Yes, and we are using arrow functions to declare these. You can use older syntax if you want. There's nothing wrong with that. Just doing a little bit of practice with newer sort of arrow function declarations here. It's good to be fluent in both. Last week we did everything in traditional, functions, functions, but arrow functions are a little bit newer syntax, but they're very similar. You kind of declare them like you would a variable, and then here you have your parameters, and then the function body is after the arrow. Mm-hmm. George, I like your analogy there. Yeah, sure. If that helps, definitely. The forms are tall grass, the items are Pokemon, and event target is the Pokeball. Sure. All right, so that's how we're going to handle our changes. And then anytime we need to, we can call handle change to get that event data and update our state. And the only other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to kind of copy and paste a function from our original EJS file. And that's just the shuffle function that we made last time. So what all this is going to do is it's going to take the results we're getting back from the API and it's going to shuffle them randomly so that we don't always see the same 3 results, right? So if I submit the form once with the same selections and then submit it again with the same selections, I want to see 3 different items. So this is a very standard shuffle. It's got a specific name and I don't remember what it is. It's like a mathematical thing. I just Googled it and copied it. So we're going to also drop this in here just so we have it. You will see I did update the syntax of this to be an arrow function. But all we're doing here is we're passing in an array. It's a straight copy paste. You can get it from the repo. And all it does is just take an existing array and it randomly swaps the elements so that we end up with a randomized result sent back to the user. So no need to go into this too much. We talked about it a little bit more last week, but you can just copy and paste it. Very standard function. All right, now we're going to get into the meat. What we're going to do here is we're going to build our function that actually handles the form submission. You like the I minus minus in the loop? Yeah, it's a little unusual, right? We don't normally use that. Utka says, I'm thinking of building a chatbot which can provide text output as well as generate illustration images to explain the response. It would be so cool. Wow, that's a ambitious project. I wish you success with that. Definitely. You'll definitely want to use some kind of a more advanced framework, to in order to do that. All right, so now we're going to build our function to actually handle submissions. So this function is going to be called handle submit, and it's going to be an async function. Why do you think the function handling our form submission we want to be asynchronous? Why would that be? And we're going to be passing in the submit event. Why would we make this function asynchronous? We're handling our form submission, and we're getting some. Yeah, exactly. We don't want to. We don't want to lock the form up. Matthias said backend can work on this. Yeah, so this is going to involve us actually talking to the API, right? It's going to involve us actually talking to the API. And we have no idea how long that API will take to respond. It might not be immediate, probably won't be. It depends on a lot of factors. So that is a completely unknown and uncontrollable variable in the fact that we have to talk to this API and wait for a response, right? And the whole point of us submitting this form is that we need to wait for that response from the API. So we really need this to be an asynchronous function so that it actually is able to wait on the response and not, finish loading the page before we even hear back. Yes, exactly. The APIs are back. And in this case, if we had our own database here, we would still make it an asynchronous function, right? Because if I was going out to MongoDB or Supabase to get information, I don't know how long that's going to take. And I need to wait on that to finish in order for it to perform properly. All right. The very first thing I'm going to do in this submission function, remember we are working with an HTML form here. The very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say e dot, say it right, prevent default. Does anybody remember what prevent default does? The hint is in the name. What does prevent default do? Yeah, it avoids, in general, it avoids the default behavior of whatever it's attached to, or it disables the default behavior of whatever it's attached to. Yeah, and several of you have said it already, that by default, HTML forms, so if we just build a plain old HTML page and we add a form with a submit button, by default, when you click submit, that form will cause the page to reload. And that is absolutely what we do not want to happen, right? The whole point of using React here is that we don't reload the whole page whenever we submit a form. We only reload the parts that need to reload. We want to control that behavior. That's another huge part of React, is that we take control of all of these built-in sort of defaults that HTML has. We remove all of those. We strip all of them out, and we control them ourselves because we are managing the state. We want to be smarter than the built-in HTML and manage all of those interactions ourselves. Yeah. So pretty much anytime you are using any kind of a default HTML element that has some kind of default behavior in React, you will see that we will prevent default because we will be managing that behavior. Like things like input boxes, especially, when you're typing in a box, um, we will even remove the ability for that input box to show text at all, and we will manage it ourselves via a state variable. Because we want that box to be entirely beholden to the overall state of the application. Yeah. So you'll see this quite often, and so you should really understand what it means and what it's for. All right. Yeah, React. Yeah. I like it. I love the enthusiasm. All right. And then we're going to set up our URL to talk to the API. And we can actually set up the params using built-in URL search params like so, which is going to configure them properly as URL parameters. And that's how we'll build our URL. We'll do that in a minute. We are going to have to put something in here, but I want to build out the rest of the URL first. So, and then we can set up our actual URL that's going to head up to the API. Const API URL, and I'm going to copy this from, I'm just going to copy and paste this. It's essentially the same thing that we did last time. Um, we're taking the base URL, we're importing our uh, environment variable with our API key. Remember that the name of this variable should be the same as the name of the variable in your .env file. So just make sure that those two things match. And then we're setting the value of indoor to 1 because this application is meant for finding indoor houseplants. And then we're going to add the rest of those parameters to the end of the URL. So by default, we're saying indoor is 1, yes, and we're adding the rest of those parameters to the end of the URL. And like I said, we will come back and fill this in, just not quite yet. Oh, I think I lost connection to chat. I hope y'all are still there. But I've got a little spinny wheel that says connecting to chat. So let's hope y'all come back. Twitch is having a blip. Still here. Okay. I think we might be reconnected. That's funny. I can see you all chatting on like this on my screen, but I can't see you in my can't see you in my Twitch Studio application. That's funny. All right, I think we're back. I think we're back. We're yes. Excellent. All right, so we'll fill in those parameters in a minute. I promise we'll come back. But for now, we're going to keep going in the handle submit, and we're actually going to hit the API. So most of this should be a copy and paste from the original EJS, but we'll talk through it. I'm going to double check that I'm not lying to you there. Grab this from the original. Yeah, we're essentially just all we're going to do is just do a fetch, a classic fetch, get the JSON, and then filter out any of the stupid upgrade messages. So yeah, this is pretty much a copy paste. I'm just going to grab that. We'll still talk about it though. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a fetch on the URL we built up here. And I'm going to await that fetch. Remember, because this is a async function, so by the virtue of it being asynchronous, we can then, anytime we need to, we can use await to wait on certain information before we proceed. Okay? And then we're going to await response.json, and then we're going to filter the data that we have. So we got some data back from the API, we've parsed it as JSON, and then we are going to filter out any of the stupid messages from the API that tell me to upgrade to premium, because the most annoying thing about this API is that certain plants are locked behind a paywall, and there's no way to filter those out without actually filtering on the specific keywords for like upgrade your subscription, upgrade. And so you can absolutely use the free version. You'll just need to put filters on these properties to say, hey, just don't even show anything that has a message telling you to upgrade your subscription. So it's perfectly possible to use the free version. You don't have to upgrade. Just filter out all the crap that comes back that tells you to upgrade. Yeah. I'm not bothering with any of that crap. We're just filtering it out. Back in January, I actually contacted the owner of the API and said, hey, I'm using this for educational purposes. Is there any way that I can easily filter this stuff out? Never heard back. So I just said, all right, fine. I'm going to do it myself and just filter them out this way, which seems to work pretty well. Hey, Nino, welcome to the stream. All right, so we've got our data back from the API. And actually now let's go ahead and, and also too, what did I miss here? What should I have put here that I forgot? So anytime we're talking to an external resource and we might be concerned whether that, I mean, there's a possibility that it could fail, right? The API could be down, right? The API could be offline. Our database could be not working. We could have the wrong password. We could have an expired API key. So if I want my app to not catastrophically crash anytime something like that happens, what should I do? Yeah, I want to have a try catch block, right? Want to have a try catch block. So that's what I forgot here. So I'm going to wrap this whole thing in a try catch block. Make sure I don't get too cray cray with my brackets here. Let's see. Gotta figure out where I'm at here. All right, that one goes there. That one's there. Yeah, all right. So this goes here. Okay. Thank goodness for VS Code extensions that highlight your brackets. That's been super helpful. So thanks to whoever recommended that to me. I forget who it was. Do that. There. All right, and then we'll have our catch, and it'll just catch any errors, and then we'll do something with those when we get them, and we'll fill that out later. That should just be a copy and paste from the old version. So yeah, now that we've got this wrapped in a try catch, we can gracefully handle any errors, whether it's showing them to the user, logging them in the console, whatever, and our app won't just fail. Yeah. Sagama says, how do you generate params again? We're going to be doing that in a minute. We're going to, I haven't filled this out yet. I promise I will. But I wanted to give a little bit more context before I do that. But yes, we will fill this out to populate the params that we're going to put into this URL. Yeah, try catch wrap. Sounds good. Don't make me hungry, Mattel. Yeah, bracket pair, VS Code settings, underline opening bracket to closing bracket. Yes, that's been very helpful for me because I always forget me a closing bracket. All right, we're going to take a break. We like to try to take a break close to the top of each hour. I'm not great about it, but trying to get better. So we're going to take a break for 5 minutes and then go ahead and get yourself a glass of water. I'm going to open that door before I die of heat exhaustion. And then we are going to come back and finish filling out the rest of our form component here. Hey, Bullseye, good to see you. Welcome. We're just about to take a break, but please stick around for 5 minutes. We're going to come back and we're going to keep working on this. All right, 5 minutes. I'll see you all back here. Alrighty, folks, we got about a minute left in the break, so come on back whenever you are ready. Make sure that you are hydrating, you got some water, make sure that you stretch if you've been sitting down this whole time. And yeah, come on back whenever you're ready. Pet your dog, pet your cat, pet your significant other with their permission, of course, and then come back. Alrighty, we are back. I'm just catching up with chat here. Celeste says, "How is your shoulder?" Doing okay. Yeah, we're improving a little bit all the time. I'm grateful to be feeling better and to still be able to do most of the things that I would normally do. So slowly but steady, getting better. Definitely, I appreciate that. Thank you. Um, hey Jim, good to see you. Yeah, absolutely. Go hydrate. George, I'm glad you like the beat on the break. Yes, that is by the fantastic composer Chris P. Nugget. Definitely go check them out on Twitter. Chris has been so wonderful, and I love it when Chris is able to pop in here on stream. Chris let me use all of his latest beats for basically royalty free. I didn't have to. He'd let me use them all for free for whatever part of my stream I wanted to. So I was so grateful for that, and he makes fantastic music. And I'm excited to swap those out and showcase even more of his songs. So Bullseye, thank you so much for the follow. So I'm probably going to take the opportunity when Twitch discontinues Twitch Studio. I'm probably going to take that opportunity to rotate out my musical choices as well. Nino, thank you so much. That's very kind of you. Starker says, I love this kind of interactive session. It really helps me to stay active while learning something. Otherwise, by myself, I get very bored. Yeah, that's the value of community, right? That's the value of community, is getting that back and forth, getting that energy from others, working on something with somebody else, asking questions, staying engaged with the material, I think is really important. That's why I think programs like 100 Devs are so valuable, because number one, they're free, and number two, it really gives you that sense of community of accomplishing a goal together. Definitely. Vibing, all fired up. Fantastic. Yeah. Oh, Sagama, thank you so much. All right. So prior to the break, we set up our fetched the API. We set up our try catch block. And so we're going to keep on going with that logic. My notes pulled back up here. Okay, and again, we're going to be copying a lot of the logic from the EJS portion here. Essentially, the next thing we're going to do is prior to our catch block, we're going to add a little bit more to the try here. Again, this is basically copy paste from the EJS, but we're going to talk through again exactly what it's doing. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to check and see if the data that we got back from the API still has records after we filter out all of these upgrade messages, right? So we could have gotten maybe 10 records back from the API, an array of 10 objects or whatever back from the API, but all of them might have been paywalled and have nothing but this stupid upgrade message. So potentially the data we got back from the API wouldn't have any valid records in it. So we want to do one more check there, and we're essentially just going to say, if we got an array back and that array had a length greater than 0, only then do we actually want to proceed and send that data to the front end. Because I don't want to send garbage data or an empty array to the front end. I want to control what the user sees based on what I get back from the API. I want to be in control of that. Sagama says, would you still recommend learning vanilla JS before React? Yes, absolutely. You're going to have a lot of an easier, you're going to have a much easier time um, getting your head around React if you already know the basics of how JavaScript behaves. So yeah, 100%. And there's a lot of stuff that you can do with vanilla JS even prior to learning React. So React shouldn't be the end goal. React should just be a helpful tool in your toolbox that you're already building, you know? All right. So I guess my point is, don't think that you can't do things if you don't know React. Vanilla JS is still really powerful and useful for you. Yeah. We built this app already once last week without React. It works exactly the same, essentially. Same functions. We just built it with vanilla JS and EJS. So, ooh, React, Toxicer. Yeah. Good to have you here. I'm glad you're excited. All right, so we're gonna say, all right, if our filtered array still has viable records in it, then we're gonna shuffle it. We're gonna call our shuffle function, and it's gonna shuffle that array in place. So it's essentially going to shuffle this array and assign it back into valid data into that array itself. And then after we've done that, we're going to call we're going to call set plants and pass in that array data. Now, just given context clues, we're going to call two things actually. We're going to call set plants and we're going to call set message. Now, this might be a bit of a head scratcher because we didn't, up here, I didn't declare anything, right? I didn't set up a set plants function. I didn't set up a set message function. So, but given the way these are formatted, what are these? What are these specifically? As a clue, remember what we did up here. So what do you think these are? What do you think these functions are specifically? They both have a similar format, right? They start with the word set. There's, yeah. What are they doing in the context specifically of this React application? Just in general, you don't have to tell me specifically like what they're meant for, but like in general, if I see if I'm calling a function starting with set, what am I doing? Setting a variable. What type? It's a very specific type of variable. It's a very specific type of variable. Ah, yeah, we are updating a state variable. So anytime you see a function in a React application, anytime you see a function starting with set and then something, you're going to be setting a state variable. Yeah. So what we want to do here is we want to track the data we're getting back from the API in a state variable, and we call this function to set that variable. Same with the message that we want to send back to the user. So let's say that if there was an error, right, we would want to show the user a friendly error message, something that we have written ourselves to say like, oh, sorry, please try again, you know. And so we would pass that into a state variable as well. Now you might say, but we didn't declare this anywhere, right? We didn't set it up like we did this one. This is a state variable. We declared it up here, but we didn't set it up. However, what do you see here? What did we do here? At the beginning of our component, there's those two names. So what did we do? Matthias says set blah blah, just a convention. Yeah, so you're always going to see that when you're declaring a state variable. Yeah, you always want to set up your function with this naming convention. Yeah, set var or whatever. So what did we do here when we set up our component? You can think of this. You can think of a component like a function. So if I was declaring a function and I had a parenthesis and I had stuff in the parentheses, what would that mean? Form section is a higher order, yes. But okay, let's think about it this way. Look at this function here. When I declare a function and I put something in parentheses prior to the function body, what is that? Doesn't matter whether it's a component or not, just a general JavaScript function. If I put something in a parentheses prior to the body, yeah, it's parameters, right? Exactly. It's a parameter. Not a destructor, it's a parameter. Specifically in a JavaScript function, when I declare a function, and I know this arrow syntax might be a little unfamiliar, but in general, if I were to say, I don't know, function, you can look back at the EJS code too to get a better sense of this. If I just said function whatever, and then I put anything in parentheses in that declaration, that would be a parameter. That means something being passed into the function, right? If I say const shuffle array and then array, I know that when I call this function, I'm going to be passing in an array as an argument. It's the same thing for components. It's the same thing for components. When I declare this component, I can pass in two functions that set state for the list of plants and the message. So even though I didn't declare those state variables inside of this component, I can pass them in as parameters. There's a very specific vocabulary word for things that we pass into a React component. Does anybody know what that is? Something that gets passed into a React component? Yeah, exactly. Big Blagger, welcome to the stream. AxumCL, welcome to the stream. Yes, exactly. They are props. So there's a little bit of a new vocabulary here, but it's important to remember that all of this is JavaScript and it behaves just like JavaScript. It might have a few extra features, but the principles are very similar. So it's not too hard of a mountain to climb when you can remember, yes, this is technically a component, but it's basically just a JavaScript function. So like any function, we can say, I want to pass in specific values into that function and then use them in the function. So in a React component, I can pass in these set functions as props and then call those functions to set state variables that exist somewhere else in the application. So I'm going to call these set functions, which is then going to go update the state variable that exists somewhere else in the application. So that's the power of React. I can declare these state variables for plants and message somewhere else and then use their functions to set them in other components as long as I pass them in as props. Matthias says, we didn't declare set message yet. Nope. Nope. We haven't declared them yet. Not in this component. We're going to declare them in the other component. But if we pass in their set functions as props, we can call those functions to then update the variable that lives elsewhere in the application. So set message is in a JS file, and then we can call it in. It's going to be in a JSX file, right? But it's going to be in. All I'm saying is going to be in a different component. So it's going to be in our plant list component. But because we've passed in those functions as props, we can reference those functions and update the state variable that lives somewhere else. We'll walk through it once we get everything kind of declared and both components fully fleshed out. We'll walk through the path that data will take when it flows through and updates the various state variables. It'll be a little bit easier once we have everything fully set up. If you're still confused, and that's okay. It's fine to be confused. That's perfectly valid, especially if you're new to React. So we'll do a full walkthrough once we're done kind of filling all this stuff out. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Look at one thing. Yeah. Oh, and I think also too is state immutable by default in React. So we can see that we did declare, these form our state variables as a const, but given the nature of uh, use state, it will each time we call that function, we can't update the variable directly, so we couldn't like directly change the value of form data by reassigning it, but we can call the appropriate function to update the form data that way, or to update the variable that way. So we have to call that function in order for this variable to update. Yeah. Okay, so we shuffled our array. Now we're going to call set plants to set our as yet unseen state variable to pass in that data that we got back from the API. And we're only going to take the first 3 values from that array, because we could have, X number of values. We've shuffled it. We've gotten everything randomized. And then I just want the first 3 values. You could change that if you wanted to be a higher number. It's really up to you. I'm just grabbing the first 3. And then we can have our message state variable be null, because there was no error. Everything was fine. However, if our valid data is null or is of length 0, so either no data or an empty array, um, we are going to, we really just want to show a message to the user. We want to just say set plants is going to be an empty array, and then our message is going to be like no results returned, because we don't want to show the user a nasty console error. We want to show them something nice that they'll not be afraid of. All right, so now we've done that. We've set our state variables based on what we got back from the API and what was valid data. And then in the end, we want to set up our catch so that our app can fail gracefully if there is a problem. Robico says it's like saving the result of this component. Yes, it's so essentially what state is doing is it's keeping tabs, it's watching out for when and how it might need to update a component. So state is kind of always watching. It's like Roz from Monsters Inc. Always watching. State is always watching for any of these changes and triggering updates to the UI as a result. So whatever happens in this component, we can trigger or not trigger a change in the UI based on what we're doing with the state. Yeah. Let it fail gracefully. Exactly. That's what try catch blocks help us do. Yeah, and as a parameter here, to think, we aren't like, these are actual functions, what we're passing in. And so then we can call those functions to update that state elsewhere in the app. And so inside of into a function, you can pass other functions. That's what we're doing here. All right, so if there's an error, we just want to make sure we console log that. So I'm going to console error. Error. And then I wanted to show the error in the console, like the real error. But to the user, I just want to show, again, we'll set plants to be empty. And for the error, we'll just say internal server error. Because these are 2 different problems, right? The first one is that they had a valid request, but the API didn't have anything to give them. And then the catch error should be actually, hey, something went wrong. We couldn't talk to the API. Something different is happening here. So 2 slightly different messages there. All right. So we've kind of set up our backend JavaScript that we needed. But the thing about React is that it, like I mentioned before, it It actually combines, essentially, it allows you to combine JavaScript logic and what looks like HTML but really isn't. So we can kind of combine JavaScript and HTML within the same component. So if you are familiar with React, what should be, now that I've kind of finished up with the backend, quote unquote, backend logic for this component, what's the next thing I'm going to want to do if I actually want to show something to the user when we render this component? What's the next element that I need in my component in order to show something to the user? Yeah, we want to have a return. So the second part of our component is going to be a return. A component should always return something. It's one of the requirements. It might just be one line, but a component will always need to return some element of something to show. So what does the component give back? Well, it gives that stuff back in a return. And the return is going to be all the HTML that we previously kind of built out with EJS. Yeah. Holly says, I noticed something that needs clarification. We should mention something about API keys in the front end. Yeah, so depending on how you're building your application, um, you're not going to ever want to like expose your API key, inside of your URL, so where someone could see it or copy it. You can. There's a lot of different ways you can manage that. Um, excuse me. You could, put it through a hash. You can. There's a lot of different ways you can, manage the secrecy of the data you're passing back and forth. But yeah, you want to make sure you want to be cautious of what you're passing via a URL. You could have some. Definitely, if you're, passing things like passwords or any private information, you definitely want to make sure that that stuff is, especially when you're talking about authentication, all that stuff should be encrypted before you send it. Yes, and if possible, you want to have some kind of a server that is not exposed directly to the user, and handling those types, being an intermediary for those types of requests. So in this case, we would build out the components, but the server would handle the actual talking to the API. Yeah. All right, so let's build that out. Build out a return here. I write awesome code and always forget to return something. Hey, me too. So what we're going to return here is essentially, remember that the body of our HTML page is already built out for us inside of index.html. So everything, we've got our meta tags, we've got our header, we've got our body, and then our root div. And so I only need to worry about the elements of the user interface that this component directly controls. And so if we're looking at the code from the EJS version of the project, essentially that's going to be everything inside the form section div. So if you're looking at the EJS version of the project, that'll be everything inside the form section div. That's what we're going to have this component control. All right, so starting with that, I could actually probably copy a lot of this from, I'm going to copy just the static tags from the EJS, drop those in there. And so we've got our div, we've got our wrapper div, got our H1, got our H2, and then I can build out my form just like I would with HTML. All of this is exactly the same as you would do if with just plain old HTML, but what we're actually writing is JSX. Yeah. Oh, and thank you, Matthias. Matthias has shared the link to the EJS version that we built last week in case you need that. All right, so form ID, our form ID is going to be, so this is where it's going to be a little bit different. Form ID is going to be just plant form. And instead of doing our usual sort of action, right? Normally we would have like an action where it says like get or post or put or whatever. We are instead going to call our function that we made earlier, our handle submit function. So as a reminder, our handle submit function is the thing that actually builds the API request and gets the data back, and then sets the data in our state. So instead of our usual, get action, and then we set up our button and we do the submit and just have the form handle that submission, we are outsourcing that behavior to our handle submit function. And that comes back to what I said earlier. When we're working with React and we are working with HTML tags that have certain default behaviors like input boxes or forms or all those other things that have certain built-in behaviors, we want to take away those behaviors and manage them ourselves via state. So that's what we've done here. We've said, all right, form, yeah, I need you to look like a form, but I don't want you to do anything yourself. When somebody clicks that submit button, I want you to call this function and just do whatever the function says to do. I want you to have zero agency. I want you to listen to this function and do whatever it tells you. Look like a form. Exactly. That's a great way to put it. Look like a form, but don't act like one. Exactly. That's what we want it to do. We only want it for its looks. We don't want it for its behavior. Athens says, is .env standard practice? Yeah, you're going to see environment variable files really anytime you want to hide something. That's very common to do. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you definitely want to hide anything sensitive from the user so they can't access it directly, certainly. Starker says the part inside return is our JSX. All of this is JSX. It just looks like JavaScript and HTML. It's just JavaScript with a fancy hat. It's just JavaScript with more features, and one of those features is the ability to write something that looks like an HTML tag but really isn't. Sort of like EJS. Yes, we are replacing the built-in form behaviors and calling that submit function instead. And remember, in that submit function, what's the very first line? Prevent default. So we call that function, and the very first thing we do is stop the form from doing any of its default behaviors. We handle all of that ourselves. Oop, thank you for the follow. I can't see who you are. Oh, Bullseye B2 and Olibix, thank you so much for the follows. I appreciate that. We are unlocking more power. Indeed. Yeah. All right, so our form now is going to do whatever we tell it. No default behavior of its own. We are going to guide that behavior. And so the next thing we're going to do is, somebody was talking last week. They were asking, well, would it be possible for us to, instead of hard coding all these form values, would it be possible to handle it in some way using a loop? And last week I did say, hey, that's probably more trouble than it's worth, but it got me thinking about it. I was like, would it be possible to do this with a loop? Probably yes. So I did it with a loop. So we're going to dynamically render these form boxes, even though that's really not necessary. We're gonna loop through and we're gonna render these form elements, all these drop downs using a loop, because we can. So we can do whatever we want now. Exactly. Yeah. So essentially, the 5 elements that we are going to want to include in our URL are like the 5 choices that we give the user, and the 5 parameters that we're going to put into our URL, and the 5 values that we have in our state are edible, pets, kids, lifespan, water schedule, and sunlight. Those are the 5 things that we are planning to talk to this API about. So I'm going to start from an array of those 5 things, and I'm going to use map on that array to generate the elements for our form. Because we can, so why not? So I'm going to have an array of those 5 things, like so. And I'm going to wrap everything that I do here. I'm going to wrap them in curly braces. Now, you'll see that anytime we are working inside of a return, anytime I'm writing something that isn't strictly an HTML tag, I'm going to be wrapping it in curly braces. Why is that? I'll keep going while you think about that. Why do I keep using curly braces? So I'm going to be using a map here on this array, and I'm going to pass in each field and its index. Because that's how React works. Yeah, that's a good point. And technically, yes, technically correct. Yeah, but the reason whenever we are in a return statement and we start writing JavaScript, we need to explicitly tell React, hey, React, I'm breaking out of the HTML for a second and I'm escaping back into JavaScript. So just in a little enclosed window, I want to be using some JavaScript in here. Don't treat it like HTML. It's definitely JavaScript. And then as soon as you get out of the curly braces, you're back into HTML. It's just telling React what you're trying to do, because you're essentially mashing together HTML and JavaScript at the same time. And so React needs to be 100% sure what it's looking at any given point. So it's going to default to HTML. But if you use the curly braces, you can explicitly tell it, hey, I'm using React here. I'm referencing a variable. I'm doing some logic. You're going to need to compute this logic before you render the HTML. So it's essentially saying, hey, this is a computational area here.
Fair
Do
underscore
this
Bozos
first.
just redeemed
Oh,
stretch.
thank you for the stretch. Yeah, I can write my code with no handlebars. No handlebars. Exactly. Yeah, it is similar to handlebars, absolutely, or EJS in some ways. But yeah, it looks the most like handlebars, and it's a similar principle. You're injecting some JavaScript into your HTML, and you need to be explicit about where that's happening. Yeah. All right, so we're going to do a map on this array, and for each field in this array, um, we are going to generate the HTML elements that it needs. All right. I'm sure I mangled my parentheses already, but that's okay. Uh, okay, so essentially, we're going to have a list of questions, and each question is going to be assigned a label and a series of drop-down selections, right? Each of the questions we're asking the user is going to have a couple of elements. So it's going to have a label, and it's going to have a drop-down box, and it's going to have a series of options in that drop-down box. And so that's what we're going to be generating here. So for each question div, nope, come on. And it don't fail me now. Or not, whatever. Fine. Div is going to have a class name of question, and it's going to have a key of the index. This is not necessarily best practice, but it's fine in this case. What the key is a required feature of React. And I talk a lot about this in my React tutorial, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this right now. But essentially, what the key is a unique value. Anytime you're looping through something in React, like looping through a list or an array, it's going to require you to assign it a key. And what the key does is it makes sure that everything you're looping through has a unique value. And so if any of these values changes later, React knows exactly which one to update. So if you have 3 values in a list and 2 of them have exactly the same value, let's say you have an array of 1, 1, and 2, there's 2 values of 1. And so you need some kind of a unique identifier to determine which of those values gets updated. Yeah, it uniquely identifies an element. Exactly. And that's a requirement for React. And here we're using the index of the array itself, which is kind of a cop-out. You generally don't want to do that. You want to generate a truly unique value for use as your key. But in this case, it's not going to hurt us. It's kind of, this is a little bit of a cop out, but it's not going to hurt us. All right. And then for each of these questions, we want to generate a label, right? And the label is just going to be whatever field we're currently on. Oops, sorry, no quotes. Whatever field we're currently looping through, that'll be the label for it. Oh, and thank you for linking my React tutorial as well. I appreciate that. Yeah, so if you're curious about what I'm talking about, I have a whole series of React tutorials on my YouTube channel. Thank you for that. Hey, Error, welcome to the stream. So for each field, we're going to generate a label. And in the actual text of that label, as you can see here in the finished version, we're essentially just capitalizing the field name and making it, putting a space in between the words. Except for this one, which I want to say pets or kids. So there's a little bit of a calculation there. But HTML for field, we're going to say if the field name equals pets, kids, then rename it to be pets or kids, just because that looks better. Otherwise, just take the existing field name and replace any of the underscores with spaces. And then convert all of that to uppercase. And then that's our label. So essentially, as we're looping through all these fields, it's going to say, okay, edible, all right, fine. We're going to replace any underscores with spaces, and we're going to convert it to uppercase. And so what you get is that. Same with all the other ones. Water schedule gets its underscore replaced with a space and gets turned uppercase. Pets or kids gets replaced with the word pets or kids because that looks better. And that's all of our label. That's going to generate the labels for all the questions on the page. Starker says ternary confuses me. Okay, well, let's look at it. So the ternary, it really consists of, a ternary is basically like a one-line if-else statement, right? That's a ternary. And essentially it consists of three parts. The first part is always going to be some kind of a logical comparison. So you're comparing two things against each other in some kind of a way and evaluating whether the result of that is true or false. So the first part is always going to be a true or false statement of some kind. In this case, we're looking to see, does the field name equal specifically this string, pets, kids? So this is either going to be true or it's going to be false. And then we have a question mark to say, all right, after this question mark are what's going to happen if it's true, and then what's going to happen if it's false. So it's going to give our two options. Since the comparison is only going to be true or only going to be false, we then give essentially both options for that. What happens if it's true? What happens if it's false? And so I like to think of it as, I mean, we're literally using a question mark here. So I like to think of it as we're asking a question, right? We're essentially saying, hey, is this field pets or kids? I literally, like in my head, it literally comes out as a question. And then after the question mark, we say, all right, if it is, then do this. Then the colon says, if it's false, then do this. So this colon here separates the true result from the false result. If it's true, do this. If it's false, do this. That's really all there is to it. Starker says, how to decide when it's best to use ternary as compared to if else? In this case, a ternary is the best fit because we're literally trying to do this logic inside of an HTML tag. And so it really works best as a one-line statement. It really depends on the space in which you're trying to accomplish your comparison. The ternary is absolutely the right choice here. Single line statement inside of a single HTML tag. If you were, doing this up here, maybe, when you're declaring functions and just kind of doing raw JavaScript, then yeah, there's no harm in spacing it out, doing a proper if else. But ternaries can be really useful when you're working in small spaces like this. Yeah, if you have more complex logic than a simple comparison like this, I would absolutely use an if else block, or even a case statement, even a switch statement. I know a lot of people don't like switch statements. I do, but yeah, if you have more complex logic, you shouldn't make a ternary that's like super nested. That's just going to be impossible to follow, and that's my opinion. I mean, it could work, you could do it, but it would be really, really difficult for anybody looking at your code to actually figuring out what the heck you're trying to do. So in that case, I would absolutely use an if else, if else stack. Yeah, exactly. As George says, if it can fit on one line, I would use a ternary, 100%. Yep. But if you have, a bunch of potential nested values, or a bunch of else clauses, then absolutely traditional. Yeah, and replace will work in this case, definitely. We don't need to replace all, because one second. Is it working now? We're back. Yes. Okay. My microphone, it's been great, but it just I don't know if it's Twitch Studio or if it's me, but I didn't bump it or anything. It just decided to cut out. So weird. I hope I didn't miss too much there. The question was when to use if and when to use switch. Um, it just depends. Switch can be useful um, when you have a ton of conditions. I mean, a lot of people, but I know a lot of people don't use that at all. Um, One nice thing about switch statements is that you are, and yeah, and exactly, they're faster than if else. Um, One nice thing about switch statements is it's really only going to check if a condition is true. So it's going to like evaluate each condition for true. And then if it's not true, it's just going to go to the next one. So it can be useful. I use them because um, I use them because I work in SQL, and so they're pretty common in SQL. But I'm glad somebody else likes them. 21. I do too. Nobody likes them but me. There might be an audio desync because I had to mess with my microphone. So I do apologize for that. I can try to fix it during the break, but yeah, I don't know if it will resolve itself. I don't see a desync issue on this side, but it could be that Twitch is freaking out. Yeah. And if you are getting a lag, you can always try to change your video set, like move your video quality down and then back up. Okay, sync is. Some people are saying it's fine. Some people are saying it's off. Yeah, reload the page, and That's what I would do is give a reload, and then see if it resolves. Yeah, no worries, George. Thank you so much for stopping in. Good luck on your project meeting. Yeah, pause and play or reload the stream. Oh, good. Thanks, Copper Lily. Yeah, so it seems like a refresh will fix it if there is a lag. Yep, just happens sometimes. Twitch is going to twitch, right? All right, so we built our labels. We went through the ternary. Um, so after the label, let's go ahead and generate our select box. So our drop down. So for each drop down, we're just going to create a select box. Select. The name of the box is just going to be the field name. So whatever field we're currently looping through, we're still in the loop here. And then whatever, it's going to have the same ID value. ID is field. And then the value of that, is going to be here we're going to reference our state variable. So we'll talk about that in a second, why we're doing this. Form data, there we go. Form data field. And then the last thing is on change. And we're going to call handle change. So we're going to talk through each of these things that I just did. Okay. So we have a select box and it's a drop down. The name of the box is the field name. The ID is also the field name, but the actual value that shows in the box, that is shown to the user in the box, is whatever is stored in our state variable for that field. Okay? So when the page first loads, it's going to look at our form data state value here, this variable. It's going to say, okay, edible is blank, pets kids is blank, lifespan is blank, water. It's going to read those. That's what it's going to show in the box. Now, whenever the user touches one of those drop downs, on change is going to call our handle change function. Now, let's remind ourselves what that does. So handle change gets whatever they selected, the value they selected, and the drop down they did it in. So it literally grabs the name of the drop down and the value that they chose, and it calls set form data to update our form data state variable with that new value. Okay? So what we're doing here is a couple things. It's kind of like it's like a feedback loop. Each time these select boxes are rendered, the value in the box should match whatever is stored in our form data state variable for that field. So remember, state variables keep track of what's happening. So it's going to capture the existing value that's in form data, and then as soon as the user makes a change, it's going to update our form data state with the new value and then re-render the box with the new value in it. So we read the existing value, the user makes a change, the state gets updated, and the value flows back down and shows in the box. So it's a loop, right? Check the current value of the state, show that to the user. The user makes a change, update the state, update the box to show that to the user, and so on and so on. It's a loop. And that's how state works. State remembers all of these things and makes updates as needed to whatever components it needs to. Yeah. Okay. Kanka says React. Yes, we're doing React today. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense in that what we're doing here is we are controlling the behavior of this drop-down box via state and then updating the state whenever we need to, whenever the user makes an interaction. Yeah, and we aren't going to be capturing any errors in our return statement here. Okay. So that's our select box, but we need to, inside of our select, we need to actually set the individual options that the user can choose from. So And in this case, we actually don't need any additional validation for what we're writing to our state because it's a drop down. So they can only choose from the options that we give them. So essentially what we're going to do here is our first value in every single one of our drop downs is just going to be the default no preference. So it's going to be this, no preference. And the value of that is going to be an empty string, which is what the page is going to load to by default. So when the page first loads, each of these state values is going to be set to an empty string. And so when the page loads, what the user will see is the text no preference because the value is an empty string. And then the other options may vary by question. So each question might have different options. And so we're just going to say, hey, if the field name is equal to edible, then we're going to put in two values, yes and no. So essentially what we did here is we said if the field is equal to edible and the selector doesn't currently have any options, then display these two values. Oh, I need to close that tag, sorry. And then we're going to do something similar for all the fields. So I'm just going to copy and paste. We'll need to change the values that are shown, but yeah, we default to empty when the page first loads. This is going to be no preference. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so we've got edible, pets, kids, pets, kids, lifespan, water schedule, sunlight. I think that's all of them. Yes, okay. So for each one of these, we're going to have slightly different options, and I'm just going to copy these from the original. So pets and kids is essentially going to be the same as the first one, but just reversed. And essentially what this is doing, the reason why these are reversed is because this is setting the poisonous condition. So if somebody wants to say, I have pets and kids and I don't want any poisonous plants in my house, like lilies for cats, or like, I don't know, garlic for dogs, or onion or whatever, then we want to set, if they choose, yes, I have pets, we want to set the poisonous condition to false or 0. So lifespan is going to be perennial and annual. Two choices there. It's going to be either perennial or annual. So perennial is, comes back year over year, and then annual is a single season. So I'm here for a fun time, not a long time. Water schedule is going to have 3 options. And again, these are copied directly from the EJS. There's no difference here. Shoop, shoop, shoop. And sunlight is also going to have 3 options. So essentially, based on whatever field we're currently looping through, it's going to assign the correct options into that select box. Okay. And then finally, at the end of our form, we can go out of the select. We're going to go out of the div. And then what's the last thing we need in our form? If I build a form, what do I need? Or what should I have? It's the last thing I'm missing. Yeah, we're going to need a button, right? We're going to need a button, and that button type is going to be submit. Yeah. And there are other types of buttons too, but in this case, since we're working with a form, we specifically want that submit action, right? Because we have a clause here that says on submit, call this function. So the type does matter. If you want to make sure that you're declaring this type and setting it to submit, so it will have that behavior. So it'll say on submit, do this. All right, and then our button is just going to be submit. And then I've got my form tag close. I need my closing tag for my div. There we go. And then the last thing I need to do is export this component. And then we have one more thing we need to finish in this component, and then we'll take a break. But I promise it's a small thing. So the most important part then, once you're done building a component, you need to export it. Why do we need to export components? What is the purpose of that? You'll see every single component that you ever build in React, you're going to need to export it. Why is that? Starker says, so we can import them? Why do we need to import them? Yeah, Grizz says, so we can use it in other files. Exactly. The whole point of components is that you're encapsulating these little bits of your user interface, whether it's a menu bar, a button, a form, a list, whatever, something. You're encapsulating some kind of your user interface, both the display, the stylist, the user facing aspects, and the logic. You're encapsulating all of that into a single reusable thing, a single reusable module. And so by exporting that, you can use it anywhere else in your application and call it as many times as you need to, and always reference back to that specific component. Reusability, exactly. Yep, 100%. All right, so the last thing we need to do to finish this component for realsies is, now that we've built out our form and we know like the 5 fields that we're going to be using, we know that the user is going to be sending either the user is going to be sending between 0 or 5 of these options into a URL to be sent to the API, right? They're going to be submitting a form that contains maybe no selections, maybe 5 selections. We don't know how many or which ones. So we need to have a little bit of logic when we build our URL. This right here, we need to have a little bit of logic to make sure that we're only sending the parameters that are necessary to get the data we want from the API. Okay. Matthias says, is there a React tutorial that's not outdated? Yeah, I went through the whole modern documentation, the modern docs on YouTube, not the old ones. I did go through the old ones a long time ago, but my newer playlist is my newer 7 video playlist is the new documentation. No worries, True. It's good to have you here. Oh, thank you, True. All right, so inside of this new URL search params, I promised we'd come back to this, and we are. What I want to do is essentially take the data that I'm getting from the form, and I want to filter out any values where they didn't make a selection. I want to ignore those. I don't want to pass, empty values up to the API. I only want to pass parameters where the user actually made a choice on the form, because they have the option not to. So what I'm going to say is, we're grabbing the form data from our form, because remember, when they submit the form, we are calling this function. On submit, we are calling handle submit. And so what gets passed into that is all the data about that interaction, and that includes the form data. Okay? So on form submission, we call handle submit, everything about that interaction gets passed into this function so we can reference it. We can look in there, we can see what's there. And that includes what they actually clicked on and what they didn't. So in here, we can say object entries. Inside of that object, we can say, okay, what did they actually choose? We're going to say, all right, form data, get the form data, and we're going to filter that data to only values where they made a selection. So filter for each key value pair in that object. We want where the value is not equal to an empty string. So look into the form data, and for every value of, that the form data is going to look something like this: edible, pets, kids, life scan, water schedule, sunlight. And maybe none of these, maybe some number of these is going to contain a selection that they actually clicked on. And we want to filter out any of the ones where they did not make a selection and only retain the ones where they did. Yeah, so that's what we're doing here. We're essentially filtering out any unnecessary selections. And yes, if this was like a free entry input box, I would definitely be doing some more validation here and saying something like, is something a number when it's supposed to be? Ideally, in your form, you want to control the user input as much as possible, right? It's great when we can use something like a drop down and only give them a limited amount of selections. That's perfect. That's wonderful. But that's not always possible. Sometimes you do need free text entry. And so in that case, you want to control the inputs in several different ways. You want to make sure that your actual form boxes are formatted to only accept the type of input they want, like numbers, text, dates, whatever. So the actual form boxes should have those limiters. And then on the client side, you can double check, you can validate, hey, this is a number, this is a date, do any type of conversions you need, check length, whatever. And then you can check it again. If you have a server, you can check it again before it gets passed to wherever it's going into your database. Ideally, if you're using MongoDB, you would have a like a model, like a blueprint, right? That your format for your data. And if you're using a SQL database, the database itself can validate that data before it goes in. So yeah, you have a lot of different steps that you can take to make sure that the data you are getting in your form is what you expect and not malicious. Yeah, ideally we would have sanitization, but not necessarily needed in this case, because it's not free input, it's a drop down. Yeah. So ideally you want to be checking on both the client side and the server side and have the proper controls on your database. If you are writing to a database, have the proper controls in the database itself to prevent bad data from getting written. So a lot of different options there. DevOps says depends if you trust yourself. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and we could also add our key and our we could add that value of hard-coded value of indoor as well. In this case, I do want this to be hard-coded. I never want it to change. So I'm going to leave it hard-coded, but you absolutely could add it to your params, 100%. Yep, because it's all just key value pairs, right? It's all just key value pairs. Yep. Yeah, we can take a break. Let's see. I think we're done there. Oh, the last thing I need to make sure that I convert this to string. And I hang on. I put this in the wrong place. Sorry. Yeah, okay, right. It needs to go right here. There we go. So we are taking this object, we are filtering any values that are in empty strings, and then we're converting this whole set of parameters to a string so we can plug it into our existing URL right here. All right, let's take a break. We're essentially done with this component. And so when we come back, we'll build out the other component and then we'll fire her up and see what we get. All right. Yes, absolutely. Get up, stretch, refresh yourself, do whatever you got to do to um, maintain your energy and maintain your focus. And I will see you back here in 5 minutes. Sorry, wrong overlay. There we go. All right, see you back in 5. Okay, folks, we got about a minute left in the break, so come on back whenever you are ready. Please make sure you're hydrated, make sure you are stretched, pet your dogs, pet your cats, pet your significant others with their permission, of course, and then come on back. Alrighty, folks, we are back. Welcome back, everybody. Okay, so prior to the break, we finished up the largest component. The other component isn't going to be nearly as large. So we finished up what I would dare say is the hard part, which is the form, the submission, hitting the API, setting all those state variables. Essentially, this component does the bulk of the work. Taking the user's input, taking the interaction. The other half is really then just taking the data that we got back from the API and plugging it into the user interface in these sort of cards right here. So the other one is more just accepting whatever data came back from the API, if anything, and showing that to the user. All right. Starker says, I'm ready. I have some ice cream with me now. Fantastic. That's ice cream sounds amazing. I've actually got some in the fridge. It's like double chocolate. So I'll probably be hitting that later. That sounds like a great idea. Grizz says, I want to start working with the APIs. Any pointers from where to start? Pick one that sounds interesting and read the documentation. That's really the best way to start getting data from an API is to first understand how it's structured, because every API is different. Everyone is going to be formatted differently. It's going to have different requirements to speak to it. So yeah, start with the docs, and then you can build out a server to format your URL, your request in exactly the API, the way the API is expecting. And then once you've been able to send that request, you can look at the data that you get back, just the raw object. Just look at the raw JSON that you get back from the API. And then you can learn how to build your app to ingest that data and display it. Yeah, the best way to start is just pick one, read the docs, preferably a free one. If you're just experimenting, there's a bunch of free APIs out there. I like so if you're interested in a lovely simple API project, I built an app a long time ago. It's still one of my favorites. It's the doggo generator, and all it does is make a simple API call to just get back a picture of a random dog, and then it generates facts about the dog. So if you're just getting started with APIs, check out the doggo generator, and you can build that and make your first API requests. Yeah, that's fantastic, Starker. Giving yourself little treats is a great way to maintain your motivation. That's great. We should reward ourselves for spending time on something, something beneficial to us. Yeah. Oh, yes. And thank you so much for sharing that, Holly. I love that. I have myself visited that repo many times. It is a list of free public APIs. Many of them are fantastic. Good place to start. Yeah. Thank you so much, Holly. All right, so we have finished this component. Now let's head over to our plant list component. This is our other one. This is where we are actually going to see the declaration of the two state variables, or the two state functions that we referenced in our first component. That's that set plants and set message. This is where we're gonna declare them. Okay, give me a second. Sorry, I'm getting my notes kind of set up here. Actually, no, I apologize. This is not where we're going to declare them, but we are also going to use them here, and I'll talk about why. Yeah, I'll talk about why that is in a minute. There is one that we're actually going to declare them somewhere else, but I'll talk about why that is once we are finished with this component. So we'll import React, Badoop, and this component is going to be much shorter, as I mentioned, and it's going to be called plant list. So literally this component is just meant to display the list of plants that we got back from the API. And so into this component, I only need to pass two things. I only need to pass plants and message. And essentially, all that's in here is the current state of the plant list. So this is literally our state variable for plants. And then this is the message that we got back from the API stored in a state variable. So in our previous component, we called set plants and set message after we heard back from the API, we set that state and then we pass it as a variable into this other component so that it can be displayed to the user. So we're just sharing information, right? In our first component, we're sending that information up. And then in this component, we're sending it down into the user interface. So whoop and boop, up and down. It's just transmitting that information between two components so that our different parts of the user interface can talk to each other. All right. All these components are speaking with each other. Exactly. Web developer with React, you can make better looking websites than with Angular. I wouldn't say so. I mean, you can make a good looking website with anything. It just depends on your level of skill with styling. I wouldn't say so. We know this because we read the documentation and assigned variables to what we get back. Yeah, so essentially the data that we got back from the API, yes, it came back as an object that was formatted in a particular way. And because we read the API documentation, we were able to extract what we wanted from that object, which is in particular like the essentially we just want what we just only want the information to display on these cards. So like what's the life cycle, what's the watering, what's the sunlight. That's really all we care about. And because we read the API documentation, we knew how to dig into that data and extract what we wanted. Yep, whoop and doop, exactly. That's how components work. You set the state with a function, and that's the whoop, and then you can pass it. You can pass those variables back down into other components as the dupe. Exactly, whoop and dupe. 100%. And those are very technical terms. So remember that. All right, this particular component doesn't even need any logic of its own. All it's doing is just waiting for these state variables to be passed into it as props. So it doesn't need to think independently. All it needs to do is say, "Oh, somebody's passing some props into me. I need to render out with those props," and just display those cards, display those elements of the user interface. Yeah, we got yoink, we got yeek, we got we got dupe. Exactly. All right, so this is just no logic here. Well, I guess I shouldn't say no independent logic. There is going to be some logic within the tags, but no, we don't need to declare any functions, nothing like that. Any logic is going to be incidental within the tags based on the props that we get. So we can just have our div here, and this is just going to be for the right half of the page. It's going to have a class name of image section, because remember, our other component was for the form section, the left side. This component is for the image section. And so essentially, we're going to get one of two things back from the other component. It's either going to be, we're either going to have a list of plants in here and no message, or we're going to have no plants and some kind of an error message to display, whether it was a server problem or it's going to have, or maybe a, just no results returned based on their selections. So it's going to be one of those two things. So the first thing we're going to do, and this logic is very similar to the original EJS, so you can kind of follow the logic from there as well. If there is a list of plants, then we're going to want to show that in that kind of card format. So first thing we say is, all right, if plants is not null, and plants.length is greater than 0, our failsafe is the failsafe is the dolly image, right? Yeah, we're gonna have a placeholder image if the data we got back doesn't have a viable image. Yes. All right, and so we're gonna say plants.map for each plant in the list, which is going to be between 0 and 3, or well, between 1 and 3. for each one, we're going to want to generate that kind of card format. So we're going to have a div, sorry. Okay, whatever. Div. And that div is going to have a class name of plant. And again, we have to assign it a key because we're looping through a list and React requires that you have a key. So our key is just going to be the index. And inside that div, we're going to have an h3 with the plant name. It's just going to be plant.common name. And we're going to join the scientific name to that. So just in parentheses after that, we can have the scientific name, specific name dot join, and we'll put a comma between them. And then bracket, and then parenthesis. So that's going to be inside of our H3. And I'm missing a parenthesis somewhere. Because I always am. Never fails. That's all right. We'll figure it out. Okay. Boop. Nope. 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 All right. Got our H3 there. That's all right. Let's see. Okay. And then after that, if there is, so essentially, if there is an image that we got, so if there's a thumbnail returned by the API for the plant itself, we want to use that. Otherwise, we want to use a placeholder image. Plant. Oh, and there was a question about why would we use a div here instead of just a fragment? Well, in this case, I do have specific styling that needs to be applied to this part of the component, to this part of the user interface. So I used a div because it has specific styling attached to image section. So that's why. Otherwise, you could use a fragment if you wanted. Yeah. So plant default image. And if that exists, we want to use it. Otherwise, we want to use a placeholder. So I'm going to copy this because I don't trust myself to get it right, but we'll talk about it. So plant default image. So this is just going to be an image tag with the source value being the default image, small URL. This is the same as the EJS, same source, plant.defaultimage.small URL, with the alt being just the name of the plant. And if there is no image, then we want to go into our assets folder that we created here and grab the placeholder. So we already moved this image into this folder, so we just want to go there and grab it and use that. Okay. Sorry, was there a question I missed? Sorry, let me see what it was. Inside this. Question was, can we use backticks? I mean, you can use backticks if you're building, if you're sort of concatenating variables in text. In this case, though, what we're trying to do here specifically, I assume you're asking about this H3 here. What we're trying to do specifically here, I mean, I guess you could. Yeah, I think you could. You could concatenate them like just with like plant common name space. You could use I might even use like a plus sign here, or yeah, maybe a plus sign and then space comma and then the rest. Yeah, you could. Oh wait, no, sorry, no. That's not how this is formatted. Okay, yes. So in the H3, we don't need to use backticks here because the space will be recognized as a space. But here, what we're doing is there may be more than one scientific name or there may not. We don't know how many scientific names the plant is going to have. Um, so this is essentially like an array of names. This scientific name is like between 1 and X number of values. And so for each value in the array, we're just joining them together with a comma and a space. So that's why that is the way it is. Sorry, I forgot how that was formatted. And again, that comes from looking at the actual output from the API and understanding what each element looks like. Because the common name is formatted differently than the scientific name. Because the scientific name, one plant could have multiple scientific names, and so those are stored in an array. Yeah. No, there are no dumb questions. That's exactly right. And it's a viable question. It's the reason why whenever you're talking to a new API, you do always want to look at that raw output. And especially with, like, for example, this API here has examples of its output on its page. So you don't even have to call it. You can literally go to the API docs and see examples of, like, raw examples of the kind of output it can generate. So you should understand how each element is formatted because a lot of them are going to be different from each other. All right. So we've got a common name, scientific name. Then finally, we just need to have the three things in the lower part of the card, which are the life cycle, watering, and sunlight. So each of these is going to be pretty simple. Just the word life cycle, and that's just going to be the plant dot cycle. Again, just reaching into that object that we got back from the API and pulling out the elements that we want. So first, again, life cycle, watering, sunlight. It's going to be plant cycle, plant watering, watering, and then plant. And again, the sunlight property here is actually an array. It could have multiple values. It could say full sun and shade, full sun, part sun. So it could be multiple values there. So we want to make sure we're joining all of those together. And then we're going to close this div. I think that's why it was yelling at me. I didn't close my div. There we go. All right. And then we've done that. And then we need to close this ternary. And if there was no data in the plants variable, remember we checked here to say, all right, plants not equal null, then do all this stuff. But if plants is null, if there's no data in there, then instead we want to show the message to the user. So the error message or whatever. So for that, we already know that if plants is empty, then there will be a message. So we're going to display that instead. And then finally, if both plants and message are null, that can only occur when the page first loads. When the page first loads, both of those state variables are set to empty, nothing, null, they're empty. So if there's nothing to display, then, well, the page has just loaded. So we want to show the splash image. And by that I mean, if I just go ahead and reload this, we'll see what I mean. Oh, did I? Oh, I turned it off. Hang on. I stopped the server. 2 seconds. There. Reload this again. Yeah. So when the page first loads, nobody's made a submission. There's nothing coming back from the API. Those state variables are going to have nothing to, they're not going to be sending anything to this component. So by default, the component is going to display just a splash image. Okay. Matthias says, would it be faster to check for the fails? Check fails before we run the function. We're essentially already doing that. I'm not sure what you mean by the fails necessarily, but we're essentially already doing that in the other component. We are setting the values of plants and messages in the other component, and we're just passing them in here on this side. Yeah. So these values are already going to be set, and all this component needs to do is ingest them and decide what UI elements to show. Yeah. So we kind of front loaded the logic there for that. Okay, I think that's it. I think we're done with this component. What's the last thing I need to do? I need to export it, which I always forget to do every single time. Export defaults plant list. All right. Now we have coded both of our components and we've exported both of our components, but we haven't actually done anything with them yet. We haven't used them anywhere. If we ran this right now, there would be nothing to show because we've coded them, but we haven't actually put them onto the canvas that we're working with. So, does anybody know where I actually do that? Does anybody know where I actually do that? Where do I actually reference these components for the first time? Renee says, wait, are you using 3 ternaries inside each other? Yep. After I said not to do that, I am. It's not great. Yeah, and you can see it's kind of janky, right? It's messy. Doesn't look great. There's probably better ways to do this. I was struggling with I was trying to balance making it look similar to the original EJS layout versus optimizing the logic strictly. So yeah, trying to make it look similar to kind of the original EJS layout while still maintaining the logic that I needed to keep. So yeah, I mean these aren't bad. Like it's not terrible. It's not terrible. Not great. Not terrible. But yeah, I could probably rethink it a little bit. Definitely. So we've built these components, right? We've exported them. We've built these components and we've exported them. Where am I actually going to be laying out the components themselves on the page so that they render in the right order as HTML? So that the layout renders correctly as HTML. Where am I going to do that? Yeah. We're going to do it in app.jsx right here. Now, there's already stuff in here, but we're going to clear it out. So what we're going to do here is I'm actually just going to blitz this whole thing. So just if you're following along, just do Control A and delete. Oh, and thank you for the follow. Somebody just followed me. I need to see who it was. And I've been missing follows. I apologize. Reverie, thank you for the follow. Quartz Jedi, thank you for the follow. Timeout Andy, thank you for the follow. Gajanovsky, thank you for the follow. I really appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much. All right, so we're going to clear out this component entirely and rebuild it. We can rebuild it. So we're going to import React and we're going to import useState. We're going to need both of those things. We're also going to import app.css just for styling. So pretty standard so far. Oops. And we're going to import our form section component because remember, we did export them, but now we get to import them. And the nice thing about VS Code is it should handle that import automatically. And we're going to also import plant. Oh, come on, VS Code, stop it. All right. Thank you. Import plant list from plant list. All right. Now, this is going to be essentially our layout component. So generally the master component is going to be called app, and this is going to control the general layout of your page. So the first thing I'm going to do here, I'm going to need I'm going to need 2 things. I'm obviously going to need a return statement so I can set up my layout. And in that return statement, I'm just going to have a container div for styling. You could sometimes you'll see this as a like an empty a fragment, like an empty fragment. But in this case, I actually have some styling that goes into this. So it's going to be a div. And this is where I'm actually going to set my layout. So on the left side, or first, I want my form section component. Oops. Form section, there we go. And on the right, I'm going to have my plant list component. And you can see that they turn green because VS Code knows the difference between me trying to reference an HTML tag and reference a component. So how does VS Code tell the difference? Forget the colors. What's the difference between a basic HTML tag and the way I reference these components? We touched on this a little bit earlier, but I want to come back to it. Forgetting the colors. Yeah, it's the case, right? Exactly. That's why case is important, because it helps React tell the difference between you trying to reference an HTML tag versus you trying to explicitly reference a specific React component. So when you're declaring your React components, always make sure that you're capitalizing them, which distinguishes them from a built-in HTML tag. Yeah. So that's a requirement. Capitalize your components. And we generally use Pascal case for that. Oop, thank you for the follow. Somebody, I'm 5 foot. Thank you so much for the follow. I like that name. Okay, so we're referencing our two components, form on the left, and then our, splash image or plant list on the right. But we're not done yet. Let's think about, remember how we talked about these two components are talking to each other, right? What did I say? We've got the deet and the doot. The form section component talks to the API and gets data back about the plants and or the message we want to give the user. And so it takes that data and it sets it into our state variables. And then our plant list component ingests those state variables and displays the appropriate information on the right side of the screen. So those two components are talking to each other. Those two components are talking to each other. However, in React, if state needs to be shared between two components, which is what we're doing here, it should be held by the parent of those components. So that way state can be shared between the two children, which is essentially what we're doing here, right? We want form section and plant list to be able to talk to each other. And so we need to design our state in such a way that it's being held by the parent of those components. We can't declare state in one component and then have its sibling reference that state. We need to have the state held by the parent and then passed into both components. That way, both child components, always stay in sync with each other. Because if they're sharing state, they need to stay in sync with each other. The state of one component needs to be shared with the state of the other component. They need to stay in sync. And so, yes, exactly, as Copperly said, what we call when we want two components to be able to speak to each other in that way, we need to lift that state up to the parent so it can be shared between the children. All right? Exactly. And Abdu, welcome to the stream. We need to lift the state up to the parent. And it's sort of similar. It's sort of similar to what you would do in just a regular JavaScript function, right? Let's say I have a value that I want to be able to use in two different functions. What would happen if I declared that variable inside of one of the two functions that I want to use it in. It would be out of scope for the other function, right? If I have a variable that I want to use and have the same value in two functions, if I only declare it inside of one of those functions, it's going to be out of scope for the other one. And so it's a sort of a similar mental principle to when we're talking about state in this way. If I want to share state, the same states between two components, I need to lift that state up to the parent so it can be distributed or controlled by the parent and passed down to the children. Okay, this is a pretty important property because you'll sometimes see, state several levels above, state being passed down through several layers of components until it gets to actually where it's being used, because that state is being shared among, dozens of children. And that's called prop drilling. But in this case, it's a pretty simple example of elevating state so it can be shared among two child components. All right, so with that in mind, this is finally where we are actually going to declare the state variables for plants and message, since we need to share them. Okay. And yes, if you could have a linear relationship where you have one parent and one child, and you want to use state in the parent and then in the child, yes, you can. It could be a linear relationship in that way. Yeah. So we're going to declare plants, and then the function set plants. And for starters, when the page first loads, the default value is going to be null. So the default, when the page first loads, both the values for plants and message are going to be null. So message and set message. So again, this is the name of the state variable. This is the name of the function that updates the variable. Okay? This is the name of the variable. This is the name of the function that updates the variable. This is the default value of that state when it's initialized. So we're setting both of these to null on initialization, and then as soon as this function gets called, the state will become updated with whatever the current value is, and then we can pass it into these components. Okay? So real quick, I'm going to go back to form section here to our form component. And you remember we talked about when we are passing values into a component, we can pass lots of different things. We can pass variables, we can pass functions, all those types of things. And these are called props. Props are things that are passed into a React component to be used within that component. So, thinking about this in terms of a function. Thinking about this in terms of a function, like a regular JavaScript function. If I declare a function and I say it has two parameters, when I call that function, what do I need to do? If I declare a function and say it has two parameters, when I call that function, what do I need to do? Exactly. We need to provide two arguments. So if I declare a function and say this function needs two parameters to run, when I call that function, I better be passing in two arguments, right? And let's remember the vocab a little bit here too, right? When I declare a function, like a JavaScript function, I set parameters, and then when I pass information in, those are arguments that align to the parameters. Mm-hmm. Yes, you could potentially give defaults for the arguments. Exactly, you could give defaults, but in this case, we don't have defaults. So if I'm calling this component and it's expecting two props, I need to pass those in. So I can't just do it like this. It would give me an error if I tried. It's because it's expecting two values passed in. So I need to set those. I need to say, all right, my first prop is set plants, And what I'm passing in for that prop is literally the set plants function. Same with set messages. I need to pass in literally this function right here into that component because that's what it's expecting. So just like we talked about before, since I've declared this state variable at the parent level, and I've declared this function at the parent level, I can pass the function into the child. The child can call the function and the value is going to get set up here. So as soon as we get a response back from the API, it's going to call set plants, and this plants variable at the parent level is now going to contain that list of plant data. So we were literally sending it up to the parent, calling that function, updating the variable, and then I can turn right around and pass that data down into our plant list component. So plant list is expecting two things, a plants variable and a message variable. So I can give it to it. I can say, all right, yep, value of plants is literally whatever's stored in that state variable, and the value of message is whatever's stored in that variable. Exactly. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. We send the data up, we store it in state, we pass it down to the sister component and render it. Okay? And I'm loving the discussion in chat, by the way. Thank you so much, Holly, for sharing your knowledge of React and for giving your detailed replies. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Holly. Yep. And thank you, Abdu, as well. Whoop and dupe, exactly. It's the whoop where the data goes up and the dupe where it goes back down. Yep, 100%. Yeah, and the way React state is such a vital part of React, and it can be kind of difficult to wrap your head around. That's why, again, I would really highly recommend the official React docs. They are extremely good, lovely examples, great lessons, and really helps get your head around how state can flow through an application. And some of the problems. It also goes through scenarios of where things don't behave as expected or the way they behave necessarily the way they would in vanilla JavaScript, given what's the way state interacts with the React ecosystem. So it gives some great examples of what to do and what not to do when you're building out your components. So again, highly recommend. Lots of great examples to practice. If you don't want to do it yourself, I went through the whole I did like a 7-part series on stream. You can walk through that with me. We do all the examples. Highly recommend if you're brand new to React. All right, so last thing we need to do here is export this component. Oops, hang on. Export, default app. So we are exporting this. Save. We're passing our components are able to communicate with each other through their parent. We're exporting it, and then once again, we are attaching our app component to that root HTML element in our index.html, and then we render the whole thing out in the browser exactly the way it should be. Oh, that's fantastic, Holly. I appreciate that so much. Yeah. Yeah, I'm actually going to check that link, Matthias, and just make sure. I want to make sure it's the new one and not the old one. I'm sure it's probably fine, but I'm just going to look. Let's see. Yeah, Intro to Modern React. That's exactly the right one. Thank you so much for that, Matthias. Yep, it's my Intro to Modern React series, which is, available on YouTube. My YouTube channel is ad-free. I don't get any revenue from my YouTube channel, and that's on purpose because I hate ads, and I'm sure you do too. So my YouTube channel is entirely non-monetized. You can do !YouTube if you would like a link to the general channel. Otherwise, follow that link directly from Matthias to get linked to part 1 of my React series. I don't do any of this for the money, and so I'm glad I'm able to give you those videos ad-free on YouTube. Fantastic. Thank you, Matthias. Yeah, and prop drilling can cause a mental breakdown. But yeah, context, getting a little bit deeper into the concept of props, you can start using context to skip some, to kind of skip some of that prop drilling headache. But yeah, that can be very useful. I do cover that in my tutorial as well. We talk about context. All right, so I think we are just about done. The only other thing I need to do here is grab my styling. Um, so I'm going to grab that from the EJS repo. We're not going to redo that. There's no need to. I'm going to grab that from here. And I'm going to just replace all the existing styling in app.css. Drop that bad boy in there and save it. So no changes to the styling, just dropped it straight in from the EJS. It's right into app.css. Going to do a little bit of cleanup on some of these images that kind of came with the default. Let's get that. That. I think we'll also want to we can just clear out, let's clear out index.css. It's not going to hurt anything if you leave it. It's just going to add some extra styling. So I'm going to clear that out. Save it. That's done. And that's done. Okay. I think we're done. Abdu says, "Oh yeah, you can just declare all your state there and call it anywhere." Yeah, it's not generally considered best practice to. I think there's a bit of a balance, right? If you're using context, it can help with prop drilling, but that doesn't mean that you should just declare all your state at the top level and just, you know, drill it down. You always want to put your state at you only want to put your state as high as it needs to be, right? You only put your state as high as it needs to be so that it can be distributed to all the components that it needs to go to. It should never be higher than it needs to be in order to reach all of its child components that it needs to. So there's a balance, right? Sometimes prop drilling and using context is inevitable. Sometimes you just have components arranged in such a way that some are way farther down than others, some are way higher than others, and they need to share state. So then, yeah, context, prop drilling, those things come into play. But we do not want to just put all of our state at the top level and, shortcut it using context to get it where it needs to go. It should only be as high up as each individual piece of state should only be as high up as it needs to be in order to do its job. Exactly. Holly's perfect. Because declaring all state on the top will force a re-render on all components, even if they don't need to be re-rendered. Exactly. Because remember, state controls what renders and what doesn't. And so state should only be as high as it needs to be to do its job. Yep. Yeah. So just be careful with that. And again, I'm going to keep plugging the docs because they do a wonderful job of explaining this, why it matters, and why you should care about where you put your state. I love it that it explains all that stuff so well. Yeah. All right, so let's try to run this thing, shall we? So with Vite, the easiest way to run it is just say npm run dev, and we'll just see what we get. All right, we're cooking on a port, so it runs. That's the first part. Let's see what we get. Okay, so good start. I can see that both of my components have rendered on the page. And they are, on initial load, they're behaving as expected. I can see that my form generation is working correctly. The form is displaying properly. The labels are correct. And on the right side, I'm seeing the splash image I expect. Oops, sorry. Hang on. So let's do this one. This should give me some desert plants, I think. So I'm just going to select one option for now. Water schedule, maybe if I remember, but don't count on it. So this should be the low water type plants. And let's submit and see what we get. Oops, got it. Thank you, OneDrive. Jeepers. Hey, what's up? We did it, yo. So we can see that what we are getting back is maybe not the right thing because I'm seeing average watering, frequent watering, but we did get something back from the API. Go us. I wouldn't say necessarily first try because it doesn't seem to be quite right,
first
but
try.
first try ish. It does hit the API and return data. That's good. So what we're going to need to do here is check the parameters that are being passed into the URL and make sure that it's giving the right data to the API. But pretty good so far. Let's do this. I'm going to put this back. I'm going to say edible yes. Let's see what we get here. See if we get different results. Oops, did I click that? Okay, so it looks like oh, there we go. It just took a minute. Yeah, so it is giving me, all right, these are correct. It's giving me edible plants here. So that parameter is correct. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a couple console logs in here, and we're going to see, I want to log kind of different steps of the process to see where we might be getting turned around. Yeah. And yeah, there's nothing wrong with using console logs. That's perfectly fine. So I'm going to head into my, this should all be really controlled by my form section component. And I think somebody redeemed something, didn't they? Oh, first try. Yeah, you did. Crayon Chewer, thank you for the follow. MIO9, thank you for the follow. Abdu, thank you for the follow. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Glad you're here. Okay, so we are almost there. I think it's just going to be a parameter not registering properly type thing. So we're going to head over to form section. I'm going to double check that the values I'm passing in with my form are appropriate. So values 1 and 0 for that, 0 and 1, perennial annual, frequent average and minimum for water, full sun, full shade, part shade for sunlight. That seems right. All right, so we're passing those in, and then what I'm going to do is, let's see, where do I want to log this? I want to get the form data and log that to see what we're getting from the form. So right here in my handle submit, I'm going to add a console log. And I'm going to say form data just to see what we're getting. And then I'm going to add another log. I'm going to log the actual parameters. So we put together the these are going to be the things that are getting attached to the end of the URL. So what we're actually passing into the URL. So first I'm going to log the form data, the raw data from the form, and then I'm going to log what we're passing into the URL to see if that's correct. Okay, save that. And then I don't think I need to log the data we're getting back because it's delivering good data. It's just maybe not exactly what we wanted. So I'll do this for now. All right, I'm just going to restart this just in case. Don't think you have to do that with Veep, but I do it anyway. All right. What did I say before? I said water schedule, not very often. All right, we'll do that. Submit. Okay. And then I'm going to inspect, and I'm going to look at the console. Water schedule minimum. Okay. So that looks correct. I might need to check the API docs and see if I'm hitting something wrong there. Let me do this. Water schedule. 1 second. Minimum, I think that's right. Actually, no, I am going to console log the data we're getting back because I want to see the raw data. So, going to hit the API, filter out those things, and then I'm going to console log valid data right here. Yeah, I mean, probably best practice to do more incremental testing. That's something that I'm not great at, but it's better to do, especially if you're building an app from scratch. If you're building an app from scratch, it is better to sort of test as you go. Like, for example, um, when I originally built the EJS version of this application, I only built up to the point where I was actually making the API call. And then what I did from there is just looked at the raw JSON that I was getting back, like I suggested earlier. That's what I did when I built the EJS version of this app originally. Is I just looked at the raw API data and I didn't even have a front end. I just looked at what was being shown as JSON in the browser. And then once I determined that that looked okay, that's kind of where I determined, oh, I need this extra filter, I need these extra things. And then I started building out the front end. So yes, definitely better to do this more incrementally. When I'm streaming, I'm really not great at that. That's something I could probably get better at. But best practice for just developing on your own is to definitely do that. When I'm streaming, I just tend to get on the zone and just want to code it out. But definitely. All right, reload this. Soup. Let's see what we get in the console. Okay. Inspect. Yeah, all right, so we got an array here. In the console, we can see sort of what we're getting back. And this kind of gives you a feel for the data structure as well. So watering average, okay. Average, average. That's a minimum there. No worries. There's I definitely want to recommend best practices whenever I can. Sometimes it's do as I say, not as I do, right? Yeah, okay, so I'm seeing some averages here. Um, so I want to log out, and this time I want to log out the whole URL that we're passing in. So do plus params. Log API URL. Okay. Save that, reload. Okay. All right, here's our full URL. Water schedule minimum. Assume there's an underscore there. So if I click on that URL, what's nice about the Google tools is that it will legitimately give you the JSON back from the API. So it'll make the call itself. So I just clicked on that link. We get everything back. Okay, let's see. Printer.com. Key indoor equals 1. Water schedule is minimum. Just double checking the format on that. And if we can't figure it out, it's not the end of the world. The point of this is less to get it exactly right and more to sort of have an introduction to React. So it's okay if we can't figure it out, but I'd like to. All right, indoor equals 1. Oh, haha, I figured it out. Yay, go me. Okay, I figured it out. Yes, so I misnamed this. I misnamed this parameter right here. This should not be water schedule. This should be watering, not water schedule. So that's wrong. All right. So that's an easy fix. This should be watering. So I'm going to be renaming a bunch of stuff here. Watering. Looks like I had it named that way elsewhere. I just didn't do it properly. So get that form data filter, get all that stuff, parameters, watering. Yeah, I have it correct here. Uh, watering and sunlight. Yep. Edible pets, kids, lifespan. Okay. That's fine. Yeah, so I'm just going to replace it here. That should be fine because it's using that field in the loop. Fix that. Watering. There. Yeah, okay. Right? It's usually the English language that trips us up. You gotta love the live debug, man. Yep. This kind of doing this kind of thing is great practice for interviews as well. Because once you've debugged in front of, I don't know how many people are still watching, but 50 plus people, it makes it a lot easier to do it in front of 2 people in an interview, honestly. This kind of thing used to make me really nervous, but that's the power of practice. I've done this a lot of times now in front of an audience. And so I'm just like, hey, either I figure it out or I don't. Frankly says watering. Yeah, I'm from the Midwest. We say watering, not watering. Exactly. It's an accent thing. Gotta love it. All right, let's see. I think I've got them all. Watering. Yeah. All right. I'm going to double check those other parameter names too. I think they're fine. That was the only issue, I think. Edible. Yep. Pets, kids, lifespan, watering, sunlight. Yep. Okay. Now let's try again. Deep South watering. Yeah. What are you doing? Gotta love the US. We've got tons of different accents. Water. Yeah. So I did it right here too. I just kind of plant water. Yeah. I just screwed it up all kinds of ways. Um, okay. There we go. Let's try again. Alrighty. Boop, 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 boop. I'm gonna reload the page for funsies. Boop, boop. Hey, that looks better. That's what I was expecting. There we go. Check it. Okay, but my placeholder image. Oh no, that's right. This is fine. Sometimes the API does return like an image URL, but that image URL is broken. So in the instance of this one, so the placeholder image doesn't get shown because it got a valid URL back from the API. So that could be a future fix, but second try. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we're cooking, friends and neighbors. And so, we could also do different settings here. So let's see. I'm going to do this here, and then we'll do full sun. Yeah. So you can choose multiple options and get different results. We got lemons, we got aloe, we've got Song of India. Ooh, that looks pretty. Yes, exactly, Holly. Really, we should break this down into smaller components. We should have like each of these cards should be there should be a card component because we're rendering it out multiple times. Um, yeah, each of these cards should be a component. Individual parts of the card could be their own components, like the images. Absolutely. Yeah, totally agree with you, Holly. Yep. But for now, I think we're good. I think we did it. We crushed it. So, uh, like I said, if you're interested in learning more about React, what you can do with it, how you can divide a user interface up into components, like what should be a component, what shouldn't be a component, what do I do? Again, I got to plug the docs. The official React docs are great. They give you all sorts of guidelines on that sort of thing, what to do, what not to do, and literally takes you through scenarios that where you like make mistakes and have to solve them. It's pretty great. Yes, components can absolutely be inside other components. That's what we were talking about earlier with, we did do that actually. So here, we did that, right? Our app component references our form section and plant list as children. So we did that. Yep. But yeah, check the docs. They're fantastic. Follow my tutorials going through the docs if you want some help. Otherwise, I found them pretty easy to get through myself. But if you want, what I do in my React tutorial is essentially we talk through each section of the docs, not me just reading them at you, but we talk through what they mean by what they're saying, right? And then we do the examples step by step together. So if you need that, if you want that extra helping hand, feel free to check that out. Um, yeah, but I hope you enjoyed this. As usual, at the end of my streams, I like to just kind of set aside some time for general discussion, whatever you guys want to talk about, questions about the project, questions about anything related to me, as long as it's appropriate. Um, yeah, happy to discuss whatever for a few minutes before we wrap up here today. And it is storming like crazy outside. No worries, DevOps. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Yes, and thank you for sharing that, Matthias. That is the first part of my React tutorial. There are a bunch of parts. Frankly said they prefer a list-like set of conditions. You can connect them with and or ors. Yeah, and yeah, some of the preference on when you get into some of the logical operations that are common across multiple languages. Um, a lot of languages share the kind of the same logic under the hood, but it's expressed in different ways, right? Um, and it really depends on your sort of background as a programmer in what makes intuitive sense to you to observe and to write. And so yeah, there's always going to be preferences on like what's most readable, what do you prefer, what do you like. But a lot of times, employers are also going to have their own guidelines for that type of thing as well. Yeah. Holly says, "Is 100 devs on Discord an open community?" Yeah, I can. If you do, let me do this. So check the website there. I just put it in chat for you. There'll be an invite to the excuse me. There'll be an invite to the Discord that you can go and there's also a link to sign up to the program, but you don't have to sign up. You can go and hang out in the Discord as much as you like without signing up. There's really no barrier to entry there. So it's up to you. But yeah, feel free to pop into the Discord. Lots of nice people there. I'm a mod there, so you can say hi to me. But yeah, tons of nice people, totally free to participate. All the materials are free. The whole community is free. Feel free to check it out. Oh, you want to help? Absolutely. Yeah. We love helpers there, especially since you've been so willing to share your knowledge. Yeah, a lot of the times we need help in. Yeah, no, you don't have to take the course. Absolutely not. No, you don't have to take the course. We need a lot of help in like the code help channels where people are asking for help like with coding questions just in general, like how do I do this or what's the best way to do this. We got tons of people asking questions there every day just on their own personal projects, stuff for their portfolios, that kind of thing. Or just general questions about coding. And so if you're willing to help out there, we would absolutely appreciate it. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I really appreciate you volunteering your knowledge, especially today and hopefully in the Discord. Yeah, I hope to see you around there. Certainly. Yeah, we always need the help, especially from people who are willing to explain things. Thank you so much, Holly. All right, any other questions? Anything anybody wants to talk about? Doesn't have to be about this project, could be about whatever you want. Again, as long as it's appropriate. Happy to discuss for a few minutes. Otherwise, if there's no discussion, that's fine too. We'll just head over to a raid. Give folks a few minutes to think about it. Nino says, "What about a stream about SQL next time?" Yeah, I've done several streams on SQL. My most recent one, I did a stream where I built a database for an actual project, like a volunteer project I'm working on for a local organization for my library. So it should just be from a few weeks ago. I think I did put it on my YouTube channel. But yeah, if you go to my YouTube channel and search SQL, you'll get several streams that pop up. where we've done SQL projects. Because yeah, I am a SQL developer. That's my day job. Um, so I do love SQL. I don't do it primarily. I don't do it a lot on stream, just because for me it's kind of a it's like a work life balance thing, right? You know, I do SQL all day at work, and then on the weekends I like to do other things and practice other things. But that doesn't mean I won't do it on stream. I just don't do it as much as I do, you know, web dev type stuff, because I still do love it. I genuinely love working with SQL. It's a fantastic language. It's so powerful, and it's a lot of fun. No, you should be fine, Holly. But I appreciate you asking. No, that should be fine. It's all good. Blaze it. Yeah, it's all good. I don't have any problem with that. Really, and you can read the when you get onto the Discord. We have a rules channel. You'll need to agree to the rules before you can like unlock all the channels. So just read through the rules and make sure that you know nothing on your profile or in your bio is going to be harmful to somebody else, or you know, just look through the rules, make sure you're good with them, and then you'll be fine. Yeah, and if you're concerned about that, I honestly don't think it would be a problem. But if you're concerned about that, Holly, you can change your display name, you know, in the server. So if you want to, you could do that. Frankly says tips on fun open APIs or a list of open APIs. Somebody shared that link earlier, actually, with the big GitHub repo of all the free APIs. Does anybody have that on tap? They could just drop it in. Thank you, Holly. I appreciate that. Coming in clutch. Yeah, so check that out. Frankly, I've used that before. That's actually how I find the APIs for a lot of these projects is via that list. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. Yeah. Alrighty. Anything else? Oh, yes. Yeah, that's a great point, Matthias. The reason my stream started a little bit late today was because I was hanging out on the Discord and I was uh, a guest speaker at a social anxiety meetup that was hosted by Matthias on the Discord. So there's a lot of community led events, a lot of grassroots type stuff that people just put together to help each other out. It's a really positive community. One of the main tenets of that Discord is that, you know, basically if you can't be nice to other people, you don't belong here. And so that keeps the community pretty wholesome and lovely. Definitely. Nino says, when is the next stream? Next Sunday. It'll be next Sunday at 3 p.m. So 3 p.m. Eastern. So today, again, today's stream was an hour later than normal. So generally 3 p.m. Eastern, whatever time that is in your time zone, on Sundays. That's the jam. Yep. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Nino. It was great to have you here. I will say, I mentioned this at the start of the stream today. So I currently, and I'm curious, is this is a good sort of end of stream topic. Oh, thank you, Nina. I am curious. Any other streamers out there? So for my stream platform, I am currently using Twitch Studio, which you know I don't have a lot of flashy effects. I don't need a lot of fine granular control over anything. So I just use Twitch Studio. However, Twitch is discontinuing Twitch Studio literally at the end of May, and I just found out like yesterday. So I have like a week to completely move all of my infrastructure onto a different platform. I'm thinking Streamlabs. I don't know. What do you think? Would love some opinions and feedback there on something I can basically just move all my junk to really quickly. I'm talking all my overlays, chat controls, everything, emotes, whatever. The pop up things. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Nino. Yeah, it's great that we can have free platforms like Twitch where you can just tune in and have somebody teach you something for free. That's really cool. Mattel says, "Don't you love when that happens?" Yeah, right. It's great. Yeah, excellent, drunk Uncle Grandma. I'm glad that was helpful. Yep. But yeah, any suggestions on streaming platforms? Very much appreciated. Again, I'm thinking. I mean, I have used I used raw OBS for a little while. Wasn't a huge fan, but that's a me problem. I'm sure there's a learning curve, and I just didn't take the time to get into it. I did use OBS for a while. I could switch back to it, but yeah, I mean that's probably where I'll end up, honestly. OBS or Streamlabs, because yeah. Matthias says, I have no idea about that, but I've been thinking about starting to be a streamer. Scares me, but I still love to help people. Yeah. And I think when you I think you should go, if you decide to stream, you should go into it with the mindset that it's likely you will only be helping one person. I think that's a great place to start. Uh, I started out helping one person, literally one, on the 100 Devs Discord in a voice channel. One person. And then her friend joined, two people. And then her friend talked to some other people. And then I was helping 10 people and 15 and 50. And then the voice channels were full. And people were begging me to go to Twitch. And then I went to Twitch and I didn't know what I was doing. And suddenly I, was getting, the audience that I am now is 75 to 100 people per stream. And it stayed pretty consistent for the past 2 years. And so I think if you're setting out with the intent to be a streamer, I think the most important thing you can do is just remember that sometimes you will only have one viewer or no viewers. Um, Success tends to happen very randomly and organically. And so there's nothing wrong with just setting up a stream and streaming to no one for a while, because that's most likely what's going to happen. Um, yeah, exactly. You don't need followers, you just want to help. So, yeah, go into it with a mindset that maybe you're going to be helping no one or one person for a while, and that maybe makes it more comfortable for you to get started. 90, like something like 95% of streamers never get more than you know 25 viewers a stream. I'm extremely lucky to be where I'm at right now, that I get as many of you consistently as I do. um, it's unusual, and I'm very great. I never take it for granted. And so if you're thinking about getting into streaming, just have the right mindset. KR says, I don't stream, but isn't OBS the most common? Yes, it is. Yeah, because it's open source. So, yeah, OBS is by far the most common. It's just, I've used it before, and it's just got it's such a high level of customization and so many features that I'm just like, oh, but I'll figure it out. I'll learn it. It'll be fine. I'm kind of the mindset, like, I just want to, I don't want a lot of flashy customization. I don't need a lot of animations. I don't need a lot of granular control over, like, the way my stream looks. I just want to do the content, right? I'm a back end developer. I like things to be fairly utilitarian. I just want to give you content. I just want to give you educational material. I don't want to have to do a lot of customization to get it. So, but I'll figure it out. I'll get there. Holly says, "Are you a shy person, Mindwolf?" It's a complex question. I definitely consider myself an introvert, very much so. Um, However, I am an introvert that has practiced doing things like this for the past several years. And so I can get up here in front of all of you and I can speak confidently and fluently for hours. And that only comes with practice. In my personal life, and I actually talked about this kind of in the social anxiety meetup that I was speaking at. Um, the person I am presenting to you right now is kind of a persona. It's like a newscaster. When they get up in front of the camera, they speak differently than they would at home with their children, right? And so we all put on a bit of a face when we're speaking in front of others or when we're doing a specific task. And so this is my streaming persona. And then when I'm not streaming, I take that persona off and I'm, somebody, I'm somebody else, right? Um, and so social anxiety and shyness are things that don't have to define our lives. Um, they can be practiced and they can be managed as long as we are acknowledging our own limitations, acknowledging our own social battery, how much energy we have to devote to those types of tasks. Some draw more power from our battery than others do. And so, if you are being careful about managing that energy, you can have the energy you need to do things like this, to get up in front of people, to speak, to do things that may be socially draining without becoming mentally and physically exhausted. And so, yes, things like anxiety and shyness are traits, but they can be practiced and managed and lived with rather than lived under, if that makes sense. You can treat them as companions rather than enemies with careful management. Frankly says, I suppose you need quite some grit to become a streamer. No, not necessarily. Um, you can make your own streaming environment comfortable for you. Uh, in a space that you're comfortable in, with equipment that you're comfortable with. You can make it. Anybody can become a streamer if they want to. No UI. Valley says no UI here, just the bare bones. Yeah, pretty much, and that's on purpose. I don't. Yeah, I'm a back end dev. You can tell. Yeah, and part of the reason my streams aren't flashy is also on purpose. I don't want things to be distracting from the actual content that I'm trying to deliver. That's very important to me. I don't want a ton of animations or sound effects or things dancing on the screen because it takes away from what I'm actually saying, what I'm actually giving you. And so, yeah, that's important as well. It's a balance you have to strike, right? For a while, I didn't even have an actual overlay, like the start screens, end screen. I just cobbled together some stuff that looked decent. I just made it myself, and then I finally spent money on an overlay eventually. But it wasn't really a priority for me. Nino says, "What are you going to give us next week? Subject, please. I want to be prepared." I have no idea, my friend. I do not plan that far ahead, I'm afraid. You can follow me on Twitter if you would like. You may follow me on Twitter, and I will announce the topic day of, so you'll know beforehand. I always announce day of my stream, any schedule changes, what the topic is going to be, so you'll know then. I don't have any kittens right now. I've been on a bit of a kitten hiatus lately, just for my own reasons, but no kittens at the moment. KR says overlays cost money. Some of them do. This one that I have right now, actually really liked. It's got good animations, um, good intro, outro screens, that kind of thing. So I actually did pay money for this. But there are a lot of free overlays out there too. I just, didn't like any of them, and I had the privilege to spend money on it. All the money I get from subs and that type of thing just basically goes right back into the stream. Nino says, "Did you ever do cybersecurity?" Nope, never did that. I have a background in data analytics mostly. I started out in data analytics, and then I worked my way into a developer role. Yeah. Matthias says, "May I ask how your wings do?" Oh yeah, my shoulder is doing okay. Healing, I guess. Not perfect, but decent enough. Yeah, frankly says some streamers have a 10-second sound whenever there's a new subscriber. Just don't. I know. Yeah, there's a balance, right? Stuff like that can easily become obnoxious. And again, for me, it's not about the presentation; it's about the content. Um, and so having an overlay that looks decent but isn't flashy, and keeping things on the down low as far as extraneous stuff happening, I think is helpful. Hopefully. Um, oh, thank you, Nino. I appreciate that. I love the feedback. That's great. It's something I've been working on. I've been doing this since like what about like April or June of 2022. So, a couple of years now. And it's been it's been really enjoyable so far. I always say that if I ever stop having fun, I'll just stop streaming. It's as easy as that, right? I don't I don't make any money. I mean, I make some money from this, but it's not enough to really be, impactful to my life as very much. So, I just that gives me the freedom to, if I ever stop having fun, I'll just stop doing it. But you can tell that it's been 2 years and I'm still here, so I'm still having fun. So you never have to worry about, oh, does she feel obligated to do this? Because again, if I ever felt obligated or wasn't having fun, I would just stop. So it's been really fun so far. And it's made me a better speaker, made me a better teacher, and I appreciate that. Yeah, I think that's a trap that a lot of people fall into when they decide to start creating content, whether it's on social media, on Twitch, especially on Twitch, though. Twitch and YouTube seem to be big culprits. Is that, oh my goodness, Toxicer, thank you so much for the subscription. I really appreciate it. That's so kind of you.
Toxicer3 just subscribed with Prime.
Wow, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. And Bashir, thank you for the follow. And Lord001, thank you so much for the follow as well. Good to have you both here. And for you, Toxic, yay, you're very cool. Thank you so much for subscribing. I appreciate it. You're very cool. But yeah, I think when people go into the, start creating content on Twitch and YouTube, especially long form content like streams or videos, is that they put so much of themselves into that process that then you become beholden to it, right? You become trapped in the content loop of gaining followers, gaining subscribers, gaining more monetization for your streams, that it's no longer fun and it becomes a chore. And unfortunately, there's only a small amount of people that are ever going to be able to make this their full-time job, right? Or their livelihood, be able to quit your day job and just be a streamer full-time. For most folks, that's never going to happen. And so, it's like the majority of small businesses fail. Same with streamers. And so for me, it's important that I never pin any part of my livelihood on this process, and that it remains a hobby and a volunteer. I treat it as a volunteer activity that I donate my time to willingly, with no expectation of return, right? Or monetary return, I should say. So I think that's an important distinction to make. Oh, no worries, Holly. Thank you so much for stopping in. I really appreciated all your help today. I'm glad you're here. Frankly says, how much preparation do you do? It depends. So, yeah, it depends on the depth and complexity of the project. It's usually usually I treat Saturday as my prep day for streaming, not the whole day, but I bucket time on the on Saturday to make sure that I've got my topic locked down, that my project works, right, that I'm able to, that I've finished the project, it works, I can run it, that I have no questions about what I did or why, because I have to explain it, right? And so that's usually a few hours on Saturday where it's usually about matches the length of the stream is about the length of prep time that I spend. So, however long the stream is, that's about the amount of prep time. Sometimes prep time is shorter. If it's something that's going to be largely review for me, um, but maybe something new for the audience, then it's less prep time for me, because I mean, I already know this stuff. I don't have to learn anything new. I'm just doing a review. And then, I'll know I'll spend a lot more time explaining it when I'm speaking to, you guys. So for example, the first version of this app, the EJS version, actually didn't take me very long to build, because I mean, it's all review. That's all review for me. Not that I don't get me wrong, I don't mind talking about it at all. That's why I built it. I want to review these things. The React version took me a little bit longer to prep, just because I'm a little bit less fluent at React than I am with vanilla JavaScript. So yeah, prep time really depends on the topic and the depth of complexity of it. Something like the WebSocket chat app that we built a while back, which was brand new to me, never worked with WebSockets before. The prep time on that was much longer than the actual stream, because I had to figure out what the frick I was doing. So yeah, it just depends. because it doesn't prep the what you see on stream here is essentially already a finished project. None of the troubleshooting, or not much of it. None Less troubleshooting, less dead ends, less refactoring, because I've already made sure it works. So there is something to be said for that as well. Yeah, every project that you see me do here on stream is something I've already built and executed and finished prior to the stream. Some people do live coding from scratch on stream, which is awesome. That's not really my modus operandi, but I love to see people do that. Yeah, great questions. Anything else? Hey, that's awesome, Holly. See you later. Alrighty. Feel free to ask any last questions if you have them. I am going to get ready to raid, baby. No worries, Matthias. Yeah, as always, my streams tend to run long, right? We have long streams here. The goal of my streams is to not make them into a marathon. You should never feel like you are struggling to, you know, stay tuned to a whole stream. Um, that's really not the goal. At any point, you can step away. Again, all of my streams are recorded, so you can literally just go to my videos tab, rewatch, catch up, do whatever you need to. The goal is that you both stay healthy and learn something, both of those things. So definitely important that nobody feels obligated to stick around for the whole stream. That's never the goal. So Copperly says, "Oh yeah, Matthias, I know you're good. You're good. I just want to make sure everybody's aware out there. Still sluggish today, but made it. That's awesome, Copper Lily. Good job. All right, let's see. I'm getting there. Ready, ready, raid. Okay. Who do we have? No worries, Matthias. Good to see you. We're gonna do same category. We're gonna do same category and similar or smaller size. We wanna uplift some small streamers, folks. No worries, 21. Great to see you. All right, we just rated Team Vash a bit ago. Ooh, 3D space game. That looks pretty cool. If anybody has any recommendations, feel free to shout them out. This looks kind of neat. A 3D space game. Hey, 5 foot. Thank you so much for the follow, 5 foot. Great to have you here. We got some game jams, Unreal Engine game dev, C++ TypeScript. Of course, Matthias, no worries. No worries, Copper Lily. Yeah, let's see what this 3D space game is all about. As always, when we raid, come in there with a positive attitude. Represent this community well, and yeah, let's check it out. Let's see what they got going on. All right. I will see you all back here again next Sunday. I'm going to drop off after the raid. I got to eat something, and preferably some ice cream as well. All right. Let's go ahead and start the raid, and I will see you all next weekend. Follow my Twitter for updates on the schedule, and looking forward to it. Bye bye. Raid is starting now. 4, 3, 2, 1, and go.